The disappearance of 14-year-old Georgina Kruger in September 2006 shook the quiet Berlin district of Moabit. This case, which remained unsolved for over a decade, demonstrated how a carefully planned police investigation can expose even the most cautious criminal. Georgina lived with her mother, younger sister Michelle, and grandmother after her parents divorced several years ago. Her older brother Tommy, who was 22 at the time, lived separately. The girl was tall, slender, with a bright appearance. She loved wearing fashionable clothes, used makeup, and looked older than her age. She dreamed of a career as a model or actress, so she seriously engaged in dance, singing, and acting. At her new school, Georgina faced the standard problems after moving. Her appearance caused a real stir among the boys, which her female classmates strongly disliked. The girls kept their distance, openly envying the attention she received from the opposite sex. On September 22, 2006, an opportunity arose for Georgina to get closer to her dream. She successfully passed an audition for a small role in the TV series, Turkish for Beginners. The producers were supposed to call her on Monday, September 25, with the final decision regarding her participation in the filming. The girl spent the entire weekend in joyful anticipation. On Monday, Georgina was at school for classes as usual. After classes, around 2 p.m., she boarded bus number 27 to go home. She had to ride a few stops and then walk about a kilometer. According to eyewitnesses, the girl was last seen getting off the bus. At home, her grandmother and younger sister were waiting for her. They had prepared lunch and planned to spend the day together. When Georgina did not arrive on time, her grandmother tried to call her cell phone, but all calls were redirected to voicemail. The worried woman contacted the school, where they confirmed that the girl was in class and left after it ended. When Georgina's mother returned from work and learned about her daughter's disappearance, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Such behavior was completely uncharacteristic for the girl. She was always punctual and kept her commitments. It seemed especially suspicious that her phone was turned off on the very day she was expecting an important call from the studio. The police began the investigation by checking the most obvious versions. Could the girl have run away from home due to a conflict? But all her things remained in place. She had no money for an escape. Perhaps there was some fight with friends or classmates. However, questioning revealed no serious conflicts. With the help of footage from surveillance cameras, it was established that Georgina had indeed exited the bus at her stop. Unfortunately, tracking her further route was impossible due to the lack of cameras on the way to her house. Analysis of mobile communication data showed that at 2:06 p.m., the girl's phone was located 200 meters from her house, after which it suddenly turned off. A large-scale search operation began. The police thoroughly searched all the basements and attics in the area, involved dog handlers with service dogs. They questioned all the local residents who could have seen the schoolgirl or noticed something suspicious. They checked several dozen previously convicted persons who lived in the area, especially those who had a propensity for crimes of a sexual nature. But all the suspects had a reliable alibi. Leaflets and posters with a photo and description of the missing girl appeared on the streets. The family actively helped in the search, but it was all in vain. The only thing that could be established for sure was that the girl disappeared just 200 meters from her home. This event shook the entire district. Local residents were frightened and afraid to let their children out of sight. It was especially hard for Georgina's younger sister Michelle. Her carefree childhood ended on the day her sister disappeared. Her mother and grandmother no longer allowed her to walk alone. They personally accompanied her to and from school. Years passed, but the investigation did not progress. 3 years after the disappearance, another search operation was carried out using dogs trained to search for human remains. By that time, few people, except for relatives, hoped to find Georgina alive. Only the mother continued to believe that her daughter had simply run away and would someday return home. The breakthrough in the investigation came with the events of 2016, 10 years after the girl's disappearance. During a re-questioning of local residents, several neighbors spoke about a suspicious man who lived nearby. It was 30-year-old unemployed Ollie K., who often watched teenagers and tried to communicate with schoolgirls while standing near his apartment building. At first glance, Ollie seemed like an ordinary family man. He was married, had 3 children, and tried to create the image of an exemplary father. He was born in Berlin into a Turkish family. After school, he worked as a janitor and an assistant at a construction site. In 2002, he obtained German citizenship. At the time of Georgina's disappearance, he was unemployed, making ends meet with odd jobs and social assistance. He had numerous debts due to his passion for gambling. The investigators' attention was particularly drawn to an incident in 2011. Back then, Ollie lured a 17-year-old neighbor into the basement by offering to sell her a cell phone at a low price. In the basement, he confessed his feelings to her and tried to kiss her, and when the girl began to resist, he hit her on the head and raped her. For this crime, in 2012, he received only a year and a half of probation. At the trial, Ollie claimed that the girl herself had offered him intimate relations instead of payment for the phone, and his family fully supported dispersion. The investigators decided to develop a complex operation to infiltrate agents into the suspect's environment. The first agent, under the pseudonym Hakan, was supposed to pose as a successful businessman who had moved to Berlin and was going to open a car wash. He managed to meet Ollie in a cafe where he usually spent time and offered him a job as a manager at the future car wash. Gradually, Hakan and Ollie became inseparable friends, traveling together on business trips, which made it possible to establish a trusting relationship. The second agent was a woman under the pseudonym Susie, who was supposed to get close to Ollie's family, especially his wife Malek. The couples began spending time together. Ollie's family even trusted the agents to look after their children, which allowed them to calmly inspect his property, but no direct evidence was found. Then it was decided to introduce a third agent under the pseudonym Kara, who was supposedly Hakan's cousin with a criminal past. Ollie quickly found a common language with Kara and began to show his true colors. They visited brothels together, where Ollie regularly cheated on his wife, and Kara paid for all the entertainment, explaining it by the presence of illegal income. In 2018, the investigators decided to use an unexpected twist, an anonymous call to the police from a person who allegedly knew where Georgina's body was located. Although nothing was found at the specified coordinates, this incident was used to put pressure on the suspect. Kara offered Ollie €150,000 for killing a girl who was supposedly blackmailing him. Tempted by the large sum, which could solve all his financial problems, Ollie agreed and began actively planning the crime. During one of the car trips, a candid conversation took place between Kara and Ollie, which was recorded. To prove his ability to kill, Ollie unexpectedly told the story about Georgina Kruger. He confessed that he watched her every day when the girl was returning from school and was fascinated by her beauty. On September 25, 2006, he asked her to help carry things to the basement, offering to pay her. When the trusting girl found herself in the basement, Ollie hit her on the head. Georgina did not lose consciousness and began to scream. Realizing that the situation was getting out of control, he hit her several more times. Fearing that if she survived and escaped, he would face imprisonment, Ollie strangled his victim with his hands. In his confession, he even mentioned how much his fingers hurt from the strain during the strangulation, a detail that, according to experts, could only be known by the real killer. According to Ollie, Georgina's body remained in the basement for 3 days. All this time, the police and volunteers were searching for the girl all over the area, even searching basements, but for some reason, they did not reach his hiding place. When the search subsided a little, he wrapped the body in garbage bags, then in an old carpet, and threw it into a dumpster. The remains were taken to a waste processing plant, where everything was burned, so they were completely destroyed. In December 2018, 12 years after the girl's disappearance, Ollie K. was arrested. During a search of his home, nothing was found that could directly link him to the crime. During interrogations, he remained silent and refused to give any testimony. It turned out that he had already been interrogated in 2006 as a neighbor, but at that time he denied that he even knew the missing girl and did not arouse suspicion since he had no criminal record yet. The prosecution was based mainly on the confession obtained by the agents and circumstantial evidence. Geolocation of the mobile phone confirmed that on the day of the disappearance, Ali's phone was near Georgina's phone several times, at 1:14 p.m., 2:25 p.m., 2:32 p.m., and 3:13 p.m. Several witnesses spoke about his inappropriate behavior towards underage girls. On July 31, 2019, a trial began that attracted huge public attention. The court was presented with recordings of telephone conversations between Ali's wife, Malek, which were tapped during the investigation. In conversations with a friend, she expressed serious concern about her husband's behavior, stated that she was afraid for her children, and asked her older son to look after his sisters and not leave them alone with their father. On March 12, 2020, after a lengthy trial, Ali K. was sentenced to life imprisonment. After the verdict was announced, he continued to insist on his innocence and demanded a review of the case. According to his version, the story about Georgina's murder was completely fabricated to gain Kara's trust and prove that he was a suitable candidate for the role of a hired killer. However, the court found his explanations unconvincing, especially considering the precise details of the crime that he described in his confession. All the years after Georgina's disappearance, her family kept the girl's room untouched. Every year on her birthday and Christmas, they bought her gifts, which they left unopened, hoping for her return. The news that their little girl had been brutally murdered practically near her own home was a terrible blow to them. It was especially hard to realize that the killer had lived nearby all this time and continued his usual life. After the verdict was announced, Georgina's mother expressed outrage that a dangerous criminal who had previously attacked minors remained at large for so long and had the opportunity to commit a new crime. If law enforcement agencies had taken previous incidents involving Ali K. more seriously, perhaps the tragedy could have been prevented. The Georgina Kruger case became one of the most high-profile criminal stories in Germany at the beginning of the 21st century. It demonstrated both the strengths and weaknesses of the German law enforcement system. On the one hand, to solve the crime, a brilliant operation was carried out to introduce undercover agents, which lasted almost 2 years. The detectives showed incredible persistence and professionalism, not stopping the search for the truth even a decade after the girl's disappearance. On the other hand, the case revealed serious shortcomings in the system of control over persons prone to sexual crimes. Ali K. repeatedly demonstrated dangerous behavior towards underage girls but received only suspended sentences. Even after a brutal attack on a 17-year-old girl, he remained at large, which allowed him to continue to pose a threat to those around him. The professional work of the undercover agents played a special role in solving the crime. They were able to create such convincing legends and so skillfully gain the trust of the suspect that he eventually revealed his darkest secret. It is noteworthy that the confession was obtained not under pressure or threats, but in a casual conversation when Ali himself decided to brag about his experience to a person whom he considered an accomplice. An important aspect of the case was the use of modern technologies to gather evidence. Geolocation of mobile phones made it possible to establish that on the day of Georgina's disappearance, the phones of the victim and the killer were near each other at a critical moment. Recordings of the suspects and his wife's telephone conversations provided important information about the nature of their relationship and Malek's fears about her husband's behavior. This story also showed how important it is not to stop the investigation even in cases where it seems that all possibilities have been exhausted. For 10 years, the case seemed hopeless. There was no body of the victim, no direct evidence of the crime, no reliable witnesses. However, thanks to the persistence of the investigators and the use of non-standard methods of investigation, the killer was still exposed and brought to justice. The tragic fate of Georgina Kruger forced German society to reconsider its attitude towards the safety of children in an urban environment. After this case, many schools strengthened security measures and introduced special training programs for children on the roles of personal safety. Parents began to pay more attention to how their children move around the city, with whom they communicate, what strangers live in the neighborhood. This lesson was especially painful for the Kruger family. Georgina's younger sister, Michelle, lost not only her sister but also her carefree childhood. Constant fear and overprotection from her mother and grandmother affected her development and personality formation. The older brother Tommy, who lived separately, blamed himself for a long time for not being around and not being able to protect his sister. After the trial, Georgina's mother admitted to journalists that the most terrible thing for her was the realization that the killer had lived so close all this time and that she could have met him on the street every day without even suspecting that he was responsible for her daughter's death. She said that for years she had tried to convince herself that Georgina was alive and had simply run away, perhaps to India, which she often dreamed about to become an actress. Reality turned out to be much crueler. The case also had a significant impact on the German legal system. After it gained publicity, a review of legislation on the punishment of sexual crimes against minors was initiated. Many experts and public figures emphasized the need for stricter control over persons who have convictions for such offenses and the inadmissibility of assigning suspended sentences in such cases. Ali K's family, despite all the evidence, continues to insist on his innocence. His wife Malek, who during the investigation expressed serious concerns about her husband's behavior, suddenly changed her position after the trial and began to claim that it was all a provocation by the police. Ali's 3 children found themselves in a difficult situation. Their father was recognized as a brutal killer, but they continued to believe in his innocence. The investigators who worked on the case later admitted that the operation to infiltrate agents was one of the most difficult in their practice. They had to create such believable legends that they could withstand thorough scrutiny from not only Ali himself but also his relatives and acquaintances. It was especially difficult for the agent Susie, who had to maintain close friendly relations with the suspect's wife for many months. The success of the operation largely depended on the correctly chosen bait, the offer of a high-paying job at a non-existent car wash. Knowing about Ali's financial problems and his passion for the beautiful life, the investigators correctly calculated that he would not be able to resist such an opportunity. This made it possible to establish a trusting relationship with him and gradually lead him to a situation where he himself wanted to boast about his criminal experience. Psychologists who analyzed Ali K's behavior noted the characteristic features of a serial predator. He carefully selected victims, watched them for a long time, used children's trust in adults and his status as a neighbor. His previous attack on a 17-year-old girl demonstrated a similar handwriting, luring into the basement under a plausible pretext. Experts believe that if he had not been stopped, he could have committed new crimes. The Georgina Kruger case became an important lesson for law enforcement agencies and society as a whole. It showed that even the most carefully hidden crimes can be solved thanks to the professionalism of investigators and the use of modern methods of investigation. At the same time, it reminded us of the need for a more attentive attitude to the safety of children and adolescents, especially in an urban environment. The memory of Georgina Kruger lives on not only in the hearts of her loved ones but also in the minds of many people. Her story became a symbol of how important it is not to lose hope for the establishment of truth and the punishment of criminals, even if it takes years of painstaking work. At the same time, it remains a painful reminder of the price that can be paid for a frivolous attitude to the first signs of dangerous behavior of potential criminals. At the place where Georgina was last seen, local residents created an improvised memorial. People bring flowers, candles, and toys to honor the memory of the girl whose life was cut short so early and tragically. Every year on the day of her disappearance, not only relatives and friends gather here but also complete strangers who were deeply affected by this story. For the investigators who worked on solving this crime, the Georgina case became one of the most memorable in their careers. They not only achieved the conviction of the killer but also helped change the system of dealing with such crimes. Now the police take reports of suspicious behavior towards minors much more seriously, and a method of introducing undercover agents, practiced during this operation, is used to solve other complex cases. The story of Georgina Kruger will forever remain in the annals of German criminology as an example that justice can triumph even many years after a crime. At the same time, it serves as a constant reminder of the need to protect the most vulnerable members of society and not leave any signals about a possible threat to their safety unattended. The Georgina Kruger case also raised an important question about the role of the media in investigating such crimes. Throughout all the years after the girl's disappearance, journalists regularly returned to this topic, maintaining public interest and helping the investigation obtain new information from witnesses. At the same time, excessive press attention sometimes complicated the work of the police, especially during the secret operation to introduce agents. The disclosure of this crime became possible thanks to a combination of classical methods of police work with the latest technologies and non-standard approaches to investigation. International cooperation also played an important role. German investigators consulted with colleagues from other countries where similar, cold cases had been successfully solved. Today, the story of Georgina Kruger is studied in police academies as an example of how important it is not to stop the investigation even in the most difficult cases. Her case changed not only the methods of work of law enforcement agencies but also society's attitude to the problem of the safety of children and adolescents. Thanks to this tragic case, many potential victims were saved, because now both the police and citizens pay much more attention to the first signs of dangerous behavior. Every year on Georgina's birthday, her family organizes charity events to support organizations that search for missing children and help victims of violence. Thus, the memory of the girl who dreamed of becoming an actress continues to live on in good deeds that help other children avoid her tragic fate. Georgina Kruger's death became not just another criminal case, it forced German society to rethink its values and priorities. Thanks to this case, legislation on the protection of children was strengthened, new educational safety programs for school children were introduced, and additional mechanisms for monitoring persons who pose a potential threat to minors were created. Georgina's room in her mother's house still remains untouched, as a symbol of unquenchable hope and love, as a reminder that justice, although not always quick, inevitably comes. Her story continues to live in the hearts of people, reminding us of how important it is to protect our children and never give up in the search for truth, no matter how bitter it may be. The tragic story of Georgina Kruger inevitably makes us think about many things. First and foremost, about our children's safety in today's world. Despite all the technical means of control, improvements in law enforcement, and better education, children continue to disappear. They are kidnapped, raped, and murdered by perverts whom we often surround with an aura of respectability. What can we do? How can we protect ourselves? There are no universal solutions. However, some rules are worth learning. For example, never letting children go to unfamiliar places with strangers. Teaching them not to trust overly friendly adults. Not being afraid to call for help if someone makes them do something uncomfortable. Always telling parents where they're going and with whom. And of course, one of the main rules is being vigilant and attentive parents. Taking interest in our children's lives, their friends, and their problems. Not being too lazy to walk them to school one extra time or pick them up from activities. Keeping track of children's movements using gadgets. Maybe it limits a child's personal freedom, but safety is worth it. Unfortunately, even all these measures don't guarantee 100% protection. Because evil is ingenious and insidious. It hides behind the mask of goodness and pretends to be familiar. Until it catches its victim in its clutches. This is where people around us play a significant role. If Ali K's neighbors hadn't stayed silent about his suspicious behavior back in 2006 and had immediately reported it to the police, perhaps Georgina would be alive. So we shouldn't be afraid to stick our nose in other people's business when it comes to children's safety. It's better to be overcautious than to later blame ourselves for staying silent. And so ends this horrifying, sad, and cautionary tale about young Georgina Kruger's death at the hands of a devious serial killer. This tragedy shook all of Germany and made millions of people wonder, are they doing enough to protect their children? Are they too naive and trusting of strangers? Are they ready to protect what's most precious to them? Of course, everyone draws their own conclusions. And there's no universal manual that can guarantee children's protection from evil. Sometimes terrible things happen even with maximum caution and care. Life, no matter how you look at it, is unpredictable. However, Georgina's story itself is a painful reminder that we live in a cruel world. A world where a predator in human form might be lurking near your home, or living next door and greeting you every morning. Therefore, we adults are simply destined to remain vigilant. For the sake of our children's peace and future. Has German society learned any important lessons from this tragedy? We want to believe so. At least after the high-profile trial of Ali K., the German government strengthened penalties for sexual crimes against minors. And that's good. Because even the threat of a life sentence doesn't always stop perverts. But the inevitability of punishment will stop many. Law enforcement and civic organizations have also intensified their public awareness campaign. After all, the more people know how to recognize a pedophile or kidnapper, the harder it will be for them to hunt children. Because under the watchful eye of the community, a criminal will inevitably reveal themselves. So let's not be indifferent. Let's not live by the principle, not my problem, literally, my house is on the edge. Because that's how you might lose your own children. And no one would wish that upon anyone. So let's learn from others' mistakes. Let's pay attention to warning signs. Let's watch those who raise even the slightest suspicion. And most importantly, let's communicate more with our children. Because then we definitely won't miss trouble coming. If each of us changes our attitude even slightly after Georgina Kruger's tragedy, may she rest in peace. And may we all have peaceful skies and a safe future for our children.
Montreal, 1975. The city, sprawling on the banks of the St. Lawrence River, was bustling with life. The streets were filled with the sounds of French and English, creating a unique atmosphere of cultural diversity. Spring was gradually taking hold, and city dwellers were eagerly awaiting warmth after the long Canadian winter. In the southwestern part of the city lay the district of Pointe-Saint-Charles, or simply the Point, as it was affectionately called by locals. This was one of the oldest neighborhoods in Montreal, with a rich history and a tight-knit community. Here, everyone knew their neighbor, and children played carefree in the streets until late in the evening. No one suspected that this quiet, peaceful corner of Montreal would soon become the site of a tragedy that would shake the entire city and remain an unsolved mystery for decades to come. Sharon Kim Pryor was born on February 9, 1959, to Yvonne and George Pryor. Yvonne, originally from England, had moved to Canada as a child with her parents. There, she met George, who served in the Canadian Armed Forces. The young couple fell in love quickly, got married, and Sharon became their firstborn. From early childhood, Sharon showed extraordinary kindness and caring. She adored animals and often brought home stray kittens and puppies which she fed and nursed. This love for our smaller brothers defined her dream, to become a veterinarian. At school, Sharon was a diligent student, albeit a bit shy. She found her passion in sports, joining the Boys and Girls Club where she played floor hockey. Besides sports, the girl was fascinated by art and crafts. Despite her parents' divorce in 1965, Sharon remained a cheerful child. She helped her mother take care of her younger twin sisters, Doreen and Maureen, and brother Georgie. The family settled in the Pointe-Saint-Charles area, where Sharon quickly gained a reputation as a responsible and kind girl. In her teenage years, Sharon, like many of her peers, became fascinated with music, especially the work of Elton John. She started dating a boy named John, whom she had been in love with since 4th grade. Life seemed beautiful, and the future looked promising for young Sharon Pryor. Saturday, March 29, 1975, began as an ordinary spring day. Sharon woke up early, as always. She made her bed and went down to the kitchen, where her mother, Yvonne, was already preparing breakfast. There was a special excitement in the air that day. Easter was approaching, and the Pryor family was preparing for the celebration. After breakfast, Sharon helped her mother clear the table. Yvonne still had a lot to do. She needed to buy groceries for the holiday dinner and gifts for the children. While her mother was out, Sharon decided to paint eggs for her younger siblings. The girl carefully prepared paints and decorations. She boiled 8 eggs and started painting them, trying to make each one special. When Yvonne returned from the store, Sharon was still immersed in her task. She had managed to paint only half of each egg, leaving them to dry so she could finish the work later. Around 3:45 p.m., Sharon told her mother that she was going to the Boys and Girls Club to pick up her Leo's Boys jacket. This jacket was special. It was given to children who had sold a certain number of lottery tickets to support the club. Sharon had worked hard to earn this jacket and was now eagerly waiting for it. Unfortunately, when Sharon arrived at the club, it turned out that jackets in her size were not available. This upset the girl, but she didn't show it. Instead, she took a jacket for her friend and dropped it off at her house. Returning home, Sharon continued painting eggs. At 4:30 p.m., a local priest visited them, bringing the children a box of chocolate candies in the shape of turtles. The next 45 minutes were spent talking about Easter while Sharon finished her work. In the evening, the whole family, Sharon, her mother Yvonne, younger sisters and brother, grandmother, and Doug, the man Yvonne was dating, sat down for dinner. Yvonne had prepared a stew, which the children didn't really like but ate anyway. After dinner, Sharon helped wash the dishes and then asked permission to go to Marina's Pizzeria, a popular hangout for teenagers, which was only 5 blocks from their house. Yvonne didn't object. She trusted her responsible daughter. Around 6 p.m., a friend came to Sharon to spend time with her while she was getting ready. The girls talked and joked while Sharon was choosing what to wear. Eventually, she borrowed a sweater from her mother and put on her favorite suede jacket. At 7 p.m., Sharon said goodbye to her mother and left the house with her friend. It was drizzling outside, and Sharon was a bit worried about her suede jacket, but Yvonne reassured her, saying it was just a light rain. No one could have predicted that this would be the last time Yvonne saw her daughter alive. When the clock struck 11 p.m. and Sharon still hadn't returned home, Yvonne began to worry. This was uncharacteristic of her daughter. She always adhered to curfew, or at least called if she was running late. Yvonne tried to calm herself with the thought that Sharon might have been so engrossed in conversation with friends that she lost track of time. At 1:30 a.m., Yvonne's concern grew into real panic. She stood by the living room window, peering into the darkness, hoping to see her daughter's approaching silhouette. Sharon's younger sisters, Doreen and Maureen, were also awake, looking out from their second-floor bedroom window. When morning came, and Sharon still hadn't returned, Yvonne began calling her friends. None of them had seen Sharon the previous evening. She hadn't shown up at Marina's Pizzeria as planned. Friends suggested she might have gone to a hockey game with John and his company, but when they contacted them, it turned out Sharon wasn't there either. Yvonne's heart sank when she received a call from Sharon's friend, Mary. She reported disturbing news. Around 7:30 p.m., not far from the pizzeria, a 23-year-old woman named Cheryl Roy had been attacked by an unknown man with a knife. Fortunately, the attacker was scared off by a passerby. The description of the criminal, a white man with blue eyes and a mustache, dressed in a dark blue jacket and black shoes, made Yvonne's blood run cold. Without wasting time, Yvonne went to the police. Soon, the entire neighborhood was on its feet. Hundreds of volunteers, neighbors, friends, just concerned Montreal residents, took to the streets to help search for Sharon. They put up flyers with her photo, questioned passers-by, searched parks and abandoned buildings. Yvonne appeared on television, begging those who might be holding her daughter to return her home safe and sound. Her emotional appeal touched the hearts of many viewers, and the number of volunteers joining the search increased. The police thoroughly questioned everyone who might have seen Sharon that evening. They checked alibis of suspects, analyzed surveillance camera footage, although there weren't many in 1975, tried to reconstruct the girl's route. Days passed, but no traces of Sharon were found. Some began to suggest that she might have run away from home, but family and close friends categorically rejected this version. Sharon had no reason to run away. She loved her family, had good relationships with friends and her boyfriend. Moreover, she hadn't taken any money or personal belongings with her. Tension in the Pointe Saint-Charles area grew with each passing day. Parents were afraid to let their children out on the street. Neighbors looked at each other with suspicion. A place that had always been considered safe suddenly became a source of fear and uncertainty. The morning of April 1st, 1975 began for Yvonne Pryor, like the previous days, with anxious anticipation. At 6 o'clock in the morning, she noticed an acquaintance named Ronnie knocking on the neighbor's door. He had a newspaper under his arm. Sensing something was wrong, Yvonne went out into the street. Without saying a word, she snatched the newspaper from Ronnie's hands. He shouted, "No, Yvonne, don't look." But it was too late. On the front page, Yvonne saw a photo of a body found in the snow. Although the face wasn't visible, the mother immediately recognized her daughter's shoes. Sharon's body was discovered early that morning by beekeeper Jacques Bertrand in Longueuil, a city on the opposite bank of the St. Lawrence River, about 25 minutes' drive from Pointe Saint-Charles. Bertrand had come to check on his apiary after a report of open gates and found the girl's body. The police quickly cordoned off the crime scene. Sharon was dressed only in a suede jacket and blue sweater, with socks and shoes on her feet. Her jeans were lying a few meters away from the body, and her underwear was hanging on a nearby branch. In the girl's hair, they found a partially chewed ribbon, possibly used as a gag. In Sharon's hand, she was tightly clutching a branch, indicating her desperate struggle for life. Investigators found several important pieces of evidence. 15 meters from the body, they discovered tire tracks and a bloody trail leading to where Sharon was lying. The absence of drag marks and dirt on the victim's shoes indicated that she was likely carried from a vehicle. Near the body, they found a man's shirt size 17, with 34-inch sleeves, which they believed was used to tie the victim's hands. By the gate, they found a clear imprint of a right shoe size 8.5. They also found a receipt for a Leo's Boys jacket with Sharon Pryor's name on it. This horrific discovery shocked the entire Montreal community. The dreams and hopes of a young girl, her plans for the future, all of this was ruthlessly destroyed. Now, investigators face the task of finding the person responsible for this terrible crime. After the discovery of Sharon Pryor's body, the Montreal police launched a large-scale investigation. Detectives carefully examined every detail, trying to piece together a complete picture of what happened on the night of March 29th to 30th. The autopsy results showed that death occurred approximately 20 hours before the body was discovered. This meant that Sharon had been held somewhere for several days. Experts found numerous injuries on the girl's body, including signs of sexual violence. The cause of death was strangulation. Investigators focused on analyzing evidence found at the crime scene. The shirt, likely used to tie Sharon's hands, was sent for examination. The shoe print and tire tracks were carefully studied and compared with databases. The police conducted hundreds of interviews. They talked to Sharon's friends, her classmates, neighbors, and anyone who might have seen her on the day of her disappearance. Special attention was paid to Cheryl Roy, the victim of an attack that occurred shortly before Sharon's disappearance. Her testimony could be key to solving the case. One of the first suspects was Frank Daly, the manager of Marina's Pizzeria. He was interrogated but had an alibi for the time of Sharon's disappearance. They also checked Jacques Bertrand, the beekeeper who found the body, and his partner, Roger Auger. Although their suspicions were dismissed, the police continued to thoroughly check everyone who might have been involved in the crime. Investigators developed a profile of the likely perpetrator. They believed it could be a young man, aged 20 to 30, possibly a local resident. They suspected he had a criminal past, and this was likely not his first crime. Despite intensive investigation, progress was slow. Each new day without a decisive clue increased the likelihood that the case might remain unsolved. Meanwhile, the Pointe Saint-Charles community was in shock. The neighborhood, known for its safety and friendly atmosphere, suddenly became the site of a terrible crime. Parents were afraid to let their children out on the street, and neighbors looked at each other with suspicion. On April 4, 1975, Sharon's funeral was held. More than 200 people gathered at St. Matthew's Church to say goodbye to the girl whose life had ended so tragically. Yvonne Pryor, leaning on the support of family and friends, tried to stay strong, but her grief was immeasurable. The police continued to work on the case, promising not to stop until the culprit was found. But as weeks and then months passed without significant progress, hope for a quick resolution of the crime began to fade. After the intensive initial investigation, the Sharon Pryor case gradually moved into the cold case category. Despite police efforts, no decisive evidence was found that would allow them to identify and arrest the killer. Over the next few years, investigators periodically returned to the case, checking new leads and versions. They continued to interview potential witnesses, analyze old evidence in light of new forensic methods, but a breakthrough did not come. For the Pryor family, these years were filled with pain and uncertainty. Yvonne, Sharon's mother, never lost hope for solving the crime. She regularly approached the police, reminding them about her daughter's case, and sought any new information that could help the investigation. Sharon's sisters, Doreen and Maureen, grew up in the shadow of tragedy. They tried to live normal lives, but the absence of their sister and the pain of her loss were always present. The younger brother, Georgie, who was still little at the time of Sharon's death, grew up knowing his older sister only from stories and photographs. In 1981, 6 years after Sharon's death, another tragedy occurred that reminded people of the unsolved case. 12-year-old Tammy Leakey disappeared just a few blocks from where Sharon was last seen. Her body was found the next day, and the circumstances of her death were very similar to Sharon's case. This sparked speculation about a possible serial killer operating in the area, and again drew attention to Sharon's unsolved case. During these years, several other unsolved murders of young women occurred in and around Montreal. Each such case made investigators return to Sharon's case, looking for possible connections. In the 1990s, the development of DNA analysis technologies gave new hope for solving old cases. However, when investigators tried to apply these methods to Sharon's case, they faced a problem. Many physical pieces of evidence collected at the crime scene had been lost or destroyed over years of storage. Despite this, Yvonne Pryor did not give up. She became an activist, advocating for better investigation methods and evidence preservation in murder cases. Her story inspired other families of unsolved crime victims to unite and demand justice for their loved ones. In 1995, on the 20th anniversary of Sharon's death, a local newspaper published a large article about the case. This again drew public attention to the unsolved murder and forced the police to review all case materials once more. At the end of the 1990s, as the new millennium approached, the Sharon Pryor case remained one of the most famous unsolved cases in Montreal's history. It became a symbol of unfinished justice and a reminder of how one act of violence can forever change the lives of many people. But even after so many years without answers, hope still flickered. New technologies and investigation methods that were emerging gave reason to believe that one day the truth about what happened to Sharon Pryor would finally be revealed. With the dawn of the new millennium, new hope emerged in the Sharon Pryor case. The development of DNA analysis technologies opened up new possibilities for solving old, cold cases. In 2000, Yvonne Pryor approached the police with a request to review the evidence in her daughter's case using new DNA analysis methods. To her great disappointment, it turned out that most of the physical evidence collected in 1975 had been lost or destroyed. This was a painful blow for the family and caused public outrage. However, not all was lost. Some of Sharon's clothing items and the man's shirt found at the crime scene had been preserved. In 2001, these items were sent for DNA analysis. Experts managed to isolate a DNA profile that didn't belong to Sharon. This was the first real breakthrough in the case in many years. In 2004, the police received anonymous information about a garage where Sharon was allegedly held. A thorough search was conducted, DNA samples were taken, but unfortunately, they didn't match the profile found on the victim's clothing. Throughout this decade, investigators continued to work on the case, using new forensic methods. They reviewed old testimonies, looked for new witnesses, analyzed similar crimes that had occurred in the region. In 2007, a special unit was created to investigate unsolved murders in the Montreal area. The Sharon Pryor case was one of the priorities for this group. They began systematically reviewing all aspects of the case, using modern profiling and evidence analysis methods. 2008 brought another glimmer of hope. Thanks to advancements in DNA analysis technologies, experts managed to obtain a more complete genetic profile of the perpetrator from the available evidence. This profile was entered into the National DNA Database, but no matches were found. Despite the lack of a decisive breakthrough, these years brought renewed interest in the case and new possibilities for solving it. Yvonne Pryor and her family continued their fight for justice, appearing in the media and working with organizations that support families of unsolved crime victims. By the end of the decade, although Sharon's killer still remained unknown, there was real hope that with the development of technologies and the tireless work of investigators, this long saga might finally find its conclusion. The second decade of the 21st century brought revolutionary changes in the methods of investigating cold cases. The key factor was the emergence of genetic genealogy, a method that combines traditional DNA analysis with the study of family histories and public genealogical databases. In 2012, an anonymous donor increased the reward for information about Sharon Pryor's killer to $10,000. This led to the creation of a new dedicated phone line for receiving information and renewed public interest in the case. In 2015, investigators decided to apply the genetic genealogy method to Sharon's case. The DNA profile obtained from the evidence was compared with data from public genealogical databases. Although no direct match was found, this work provided some clues about possible family connections of the perpetrator. In 2018, a new detective assigned to work on the case began a systematic review of all evidence and testimonies. He paid special attention to Sharon's genes, which had not been fully analyzed before due to technological limitations of that time. 2019 brought an important breakthrough. Thanks to advanced DNA analysis methods, experts managed to obtain a more complete genetic profile from Sharon's genes. This profile turned out to be identical to the one found on the man's shirt from the crime scene, but now it was much more detailed. In 2020, using this updated profile and genetic genealogy methods, investigators were able to narrow down the circle of suspects to several families. They began a thorough investigation of the genealogical trees of these families, looking for potential suspects who matched the killer's profile. 2021 became decisive. Y chromosome DNA analysis of the perpetrator pointed to a family with the surname Romaine. Investigators focused their attention on men from this family who could have been in Montreal in 1975. This work required enormous effort and time. Investigators reviewed old address books, school records, employment documents, trying to find a connection between the Romaine family and Montreal in the mid-1970s. By the end of 2021, investigators had a list of several potential suspects. They began the process of elimination, checking alibis and gathering additional information about each of them. Although the case still remained unsolved, the feeling that the resolution was close was stronger than ever in the past 46 years. Yvonne Pryor, who was now over 80, waited with hope for news that could finally bring her and her family long-awaited relief. 2022 became a turning point in the Sharon Pryor case. The intensive work of investigators focused on the Romaine family finally brought results. In June, detectives discovered that one of the Romaine brothers, Franklin May Westover Romaine, had a criminal past and was in Montreal in 1975. Born in 1946 in West Virginia, Franklin had a long history of offenses, including theft and assault. Further investigation showed that in February 1974, Franklin was arrested for assaulting a woman in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Released on bail, he fled to Canada, where he continued his criminal activities. Investigators found 2 addresses in Montreal associated with Franklin Romaine. One was approximately 10 kilometers from Sharon's home, and the other was in the area where her body was found. This matched the profile of the killer, who knew the area well. It was also established that Franklin drove a dark red Rambler car. Experts confirmed that the tire tracks found at the crime scene could belong to such a vehicle. Franklin's physical description, a tall man with a mustache and reddish hair, matched the description of the attacker who assaulted Cheryl Roy shortly before Sharon's disappearance. In December 2022, two of Franklin's brothers, Noah and Michael Romaine, agreed to provide samples of their DNA for analysis. The results showed a partial match with the DNA found on Sharon's clothing. Genetic analysis indicated that with a probability of 1 in 140 billion, their brother Franklin was the sought-after killer. Noah and Michael were not surprised by this discovery. They described Franklin as a violent person with whom they were never close. Family relationships finally deteriorated after Franklin tried to attack one of the brothers' wives. However, there was one problem. Franklin Romaine had died in 1982 at the age of 36 under unclear circumstances. His body was buried in West Virginia. For final confirmation of the killer's identity, investigators turned to West Virginia authorities with a request to allow exhumation of Franklin Romaine's body to obtain a DNA sample. This discovery was a huge breakthrough in a case that had remained unsolved for almost 5 decades. For the Pryor family, it was a mixture of relief and pain. They finally knew the name of the person responsible for Sharon's death, but also realized that he had escaped justice, dying many years ago. 2023 brought the long-awaited conclusion to the Sharon Pryor case. After obtaining a court order, on May 2nd, Franklin Romaine's body was exhumed at Pine Grove Cemetery in West Virginia. The exhumation procedure was complicated due to the close proximity of Franklin's grave to his mother's. Investigators worked with utmost caution to avoid disturbing neighboring burials. Samples of Franklin Romaine's bone tissue were sent to a laboratory in Canada for DNA analysis. Experts were able to obtain a complete genetic profile and compare it with the DNA found on Sharon Pryor's clothing. On May 23, 2023, the Montreal police officially announced the resolution of the case. Franklin Romaine's DNA fully matched the DNA of Sharon Pryor's killer. The probability of error was virtually zero. This discovery allowed authorities to link Romaine to at least 4 rapes committed during his lifetime. Investigators also suspected his involvement in other unsolved murders, both in the United States and Canada. For the Pryor family, this news was a moment of mixed emotions. 85-year-old Yvonne Pryor, upon hearing about the case being solved, broke into tears but said she felt relief from finally knowing the truth. Sharon's sisters, Doreen and Maureen, expressed gratitude to the police and genetic genealogy experts for their tireless work. They noted that while this wouldn't bring their sister back, knowing that her killer could no longer harm anyone brought some comfort. At the press conference, the Pryor family stated, "We still mourn the loss of our daughter and sister who was brutally murdered at the age of 16. Our life since then has not been easy, but Sharon has given us strength over the past 48 years, and especially today. Sharon is here with us." The solving of Sharon Pryor's case became a symbol of hope for many families whose loved ones were victims of unsolved crimes. It demonstrated that even after decades of uncertainty, justice can prevail. Franklin May Westover Romaine was born in 1946 in West Virginia. His life was filled with legal troubles from an early age. Already in his teenage years, he began committing petty thefts and robberies. In 1964 and 1965, Romaine escaped from prison twice, demonstrating his disregard for the law. His crimes were mostly limited to burglaries and robberies, but in February 1974, he crossed a line by attacking a woman in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Released on bail, Romaine fled to Canada to avoid trial. In Montreal, he continued his criminal activities. It was during this period, in March 1975, that Sharon Pryor's murder occurred. In October 1975, 6 months after Sharon's murder, Romain was arrested and extradited back to West Virginia. In 1978, he was sentenced to a term of 5 to 10 years in prison for the 1974 assault. However, Romain was released early in 1981, having already served the minimum term, taking into account the time spent in jail before trial. After his release, he briefly returned to Canada. In 1982, at the age of only 36, Franklin Romain died under unclear circumstances. His body was returned to West Virginia for burial. Romain's life was filled with violence and crime. His own family described him as a cruel person whom everyone avoided. An attempt to attack one of his brother's wives finally alienated him from his family. The revelation of his involvement in Sharon Pryor's murder showed how dangerous he was. Investigators suspect that he might have been responsible for other unsolved crimes both in the United States and Canada. Franklin Romain's story is a tragic example of how one person can bring so much grief and suffering to others, remaining undetected for decades. The official announcement of solving Sharon Pryor's case triggered a wave of emotions in the family and the entire Montreal community. For Yvonne Pryor, Sharon's mother, it was a moment of long-awaited relief. At 85 years old, she finally got the answers she had been seeking for almost 5 decades. "I always knew this day would come," she told journalists, barely holding back tears. Sharon's sisters, Doreen and Maureen, expressed mixed feelings. "We're grateful for the tireless work of the police and experts, but this doesn't bring Sharon back," they stated. However, knowing that her killer can no longer harm anyone brings some comfort. The Pointe Saint-Charles community, which remembered the 1975 tragedy, reacted with deep sympathy for the Pryor family. Many local residents left flowers near the Pryors' former home as a sign of respect for Sharon's memory. The Montreal police held a press conference where they detailed the investigation process and the role of genetic genealogy in solving the case. Detectives emphasized the importance of new technologies in solving cold cases. Criminology and genetics experts commented on this case as an example of how modern methods can help restore justice even decades after a crime. The solving of Sharon Pryor's case became a symbol of hope for many families whose loved ones were victims of unsolved crimes. It served as a reminder of the importance of not giving up and continuing to seek the truth, regardless of how much time has passed. Local politicians used this opportunity to call for increased funding for investigating cold cases and implementing new technologies in law enforcement work. Overall, the resolution of Sharon Pryor's case became a moment of collective catharsis for a community that had lived with this unresolved tragedy for decades. The solving of Sharon Pryor's murder after 48 years of uncertainty left a deep mark on society and the criminal justice system. This case became a catalyst for changes in legislation and police practice. New laws were passed requiring better preservation of evidence in murder cases to avoid losing important clues, as happened in Sharon's case. The success of using genetic genealogy led to increased funding and expanded application of this technology for solving other cold cases. Many police departments across Canada created special units dedicated to such long, unsolved crimes. The memory of Sharon Pryor continues to live on. An annual scholarship in her name, established by the Boys and Girls Club, helps young people fulfill their dreams of higher education. Sharon's story has become the subject of several books and documentaries, which not only tell about the tragedy but also emphasize the importance of relentless pursuit of justice and the development of forensic technologies. For the Pryor family, Solving the case brought long-awaited closure, but also reminded them of the undiminished pain of loss. They continue to advocate for other families of unsolved crime victims, giving them hope and support. The Sharon Pryor case will forever remain a reminder that time is not an obstacle to justice, and that even the oldest and most complex crimes can be solved through persistence, dedication, and innovation.
Bogotá, the capital of Colombia, pulsates with the energy of nightlife. The bright lights of clubs illuminate the streets, and the rhythmic sounds of Latin American music emanate from every corner. Amidst this vibrant world, a young star emerges: Valentina Tres Palacios. At 23 years old, Valentina had already become a well-known figure on Colombia's club scene. Her talent as a DJ, charisma, and beauty quickly made her a crowd favorite. The clubs where she performed were always packed, and her name on a poster guaranteed a successful evening. However, behind the glare of spotlights and loud music lay a story that would soon shake not only Bogotá, but the entire world. Valentina Tres Palacios was born on December 16, 2001, to Giovanni Tres Palacios and Laura Hidalgo. Along with her older brother Daniel, she grew up in Bogotá, the capital of Colombia. Valentina's childhood was marked by changes. Her parents divorced, and the girl remained with her mother and brother. Laura Hidalgo, Valentina's mother, became the backbone for her children. She worked tirelessly, often at several jobs simultaneously, to provide for the family. This mother's dedication deeply influenced Valentina and Daniel, instilling in them a strong sense of responsibility and ambition. Over time, Valentina's family expanded. Her mother entered into a new relationship, which led to the birth of two more younger children, a brother and a sister. Valentina and Daniel lovingly accepted the new family members, further strengthening their family bonds. Already in her teenage years, Valentina began to show an interest in music and nightlife. At 15, she first entered a nightclub, discovering a world that would later become her profession and passion. At the age of 17, fate brought Valentina together with someone who significantly influenced her professional path. During one of the parties, she met Pablo Silva, a local entrepreneur who saw potential in the young girl. After several casual conversations, Pablo offered Valentina a chance to try her hand as a DJ. This offer became a turning point in Valentina's life. She enthusiastically took up learning, dedicating her free time to mastering the art of DJing. Over the next few months, Valentina and Pablo maintained regular contact, allowing the girl to quickly progress in her skills. In 2019, after 2 years of hard work, Valentina successfully completed the course and received a professional DJ certificate. Pablo, impressed by her talent and dedication to the craft, took on the role of her manager. Thanks to his connections in the entertainment industry, Valentina began to receive her first professional bookings to perform in Bogotá clubs. The relationship between Valentina and Pablo was not limited to the professional sphere. Over time, a romantic attachment developed between them, which lasted for 3 years. Despite their eventual breakup, they maintained a warm relationship, and Pablo continued to manage her career, sincerely wishing her success. Over the next few years, Valentina's career skyrocketed. Her natural charisma, musical talent, and ability to sense the mood of the audience quickly made her one of the most sought-after DJs in Colombia. Valentina regularly performed at the most popular clubs in Bogotá and Medellin, drawing full houses of fans. Valentina's success was not limited to the borders of Colombia. Her talent caught the attention of organizers of international festivals and clubs in neighboring countries. She received invitations to perform in Chile, Mexico, and Brazil, which significantly expanded her professional horizons and increased her fan base. Parallel to her music career, Valentina began working as a model. Her natural beauty and style attracted the attention of the fashion industry, opening up new opportunities for her. This additional activity not only increased her popularity, but also became an additional source of income. Despite the rapid rise in her career, Valentina did not forget about her family. She used the money she earned to support her mother and younger siblings. often treating them to gifts, movie outings, and restaurant visits. This generosity and dedication to family only added to her appeal in the eyes of fans. In early 2022, when Valentina's career was on the rise, fate brought her together with a man who would radically change her life. Through the dating app Tinder, she met 34-year-old American John Poulos. Despite the significant age difference and language barrier, they struck up a conversation. John, who had a poor command of Spanish, used an online translator to communicate with Valentina. This obstacle, however, did not prevent them from developing a virtual relationship. John, enchanted by Valentina's beauty and charisma, showed remarkable persistence in communication. He talked about his life in Texas, his work, and interests. Valentina, for her part, shared stories about her DJ career and life in Bogotá. Over several weeks, their communication became increasingly intense. They exchanged messages daily, gradually learning more about each other. John showed particular interest in Valentina's career, often asking about her performances and plans for the future. After several weeks of virtual communication, John proposed a personal meeting. Since Valentina had a scheduled performance at a festival in Mexico, they decided it was the perfect opportunity for a first date. Mexico was a convenient meeting place, located between Colombia and Texas. Valentina, who was used to male attention, was intrigued by the prospect of meeting an American. John, for his part, spared no expense in organizing this meeting, covering all travel expenses. When they finally met, the first impression was positive for both. Despite the language barrier, they managed to find common ground. John was enchanted by Valentina's beauty and energy in person, while she appreciated his gallantry and generosity. During the few days in Mexico, they spent a lot of time together. John accompanied Valentina to her performance, impressed by her professionalism and popularity among the audience. They also explored the city, enjoying local cuisine and landmarks. This first meeting was so enjoyable for both that they decided to extend their stay in Mexico, spending almost 2 weeks together. During this time, they grew closer, and what began as a chance online acquaintance turned into a real romantic relationship. After returning from Mexico, Valentina and John decided to continue their relationship, despite the geographical distance between them. John, who had the financial means to travel frequently, regularly visited Colombia to see Valentina. During his visits, John demonstrated a generosity that impressed not only Valentina but also her family. He gave expensive gifts, paid for luxurious dinners, and organized extravagant entertainment. This financial support extended to Valentina's professional sphere. John sponsored her cosmetic procedures and wardrobe updates, which were important for her career as a model and DJ. When John couldn't be in Colombia, the couple maintained contact through video calls and messages. They discussed their days, shared plans for the future, and dreamed about joint travels. John often expressed his admiration for Valentina's successes, supporting her ambitions in the music industry. However, over time, the first signs of tension began to appear. John increasingly showed concern about Valentina's work in nightclubs and her communication with other men. He insisted on frequent video calls, especially when Valentina was at work, which sometimes caused her discomfort. As the relationship developed, details of John's past, which Valentina initially didn't know about, began to emerge. It turned out that he was a recently divorced father of 3 children. His marriage to Ashley Poulos ended in divorce in January 2022, just a few months before meeting Valentina. The story of John's previous marriage was full of drama. In 2018, one of his sons was diagnosed with cancer, which became a huge trial for the family. The stress associated with the child's illness and caring for 3 children obviously negatively affected John's character. According to his ex-wife, he became aggressive, which eventually led to divorce. The divorce process revealed another unpleasant side of John. He transferred all the couple's joint property to an offshore trust, effectively leaving his former family without means of subsistence. Moreover, he refused to pay child support, demonstrating a complete lack of responsibility for their well-being. These facts from John's past remained unknown to Valentina for a significant period of their relationship. She saw only the side of John that he wanted to show a successful, generous man ready to do anything for her. However, over time, his controlling behavior and jealousy became more obvious, gradually revealing his true nature. As time passed, the relationship between Valentina and John began to take on an increasingly tense character. John, who was initially attracted by Valentina's popularity and success, now became excessively jealous and suspicious. His controlling behavior became more and more obvious. John began to insist that Valentina video call him every time she went to an event or performance. He wanted to know where she was, who she was talking to, and even controlled her clothing. This behavior caused discomfort for Valentina, who valued her independence and professional freedom. The situation reached a critical point when John, not trusting Valentina, hired a private detective to follow her. This fact deeply offended Valentina when she found out about it. She felt that her personal life and trust had been grossly violated. Valentina's family, who initially approved of her relationship with John, now began to express concern. Although they still considered him Valentina's protector, John's obvious obsession and controlling behavior caused them anxiety. In December 2022, the situation reached a critical point. Valentina, tired of John's constant control and suspicions, tried to end the relationship. She felt that his behavior was becoming increasingly intrusive and toxic. John, faced with the prospect of losing Valentina, resorted to desperate measures. He confessed that he had hired a private detective who allegedly confirmed his suspicions about Valentina's infidelity. This statement led to a heated argument, during which Valentina firmly denied all accusations. Realizing that his actions could lead to the end of the relationship, John abruptly changed tactics. He began to beg Valentina for forgiveness, promising to change. Moreover, he announced his decision to move from Texas to Colombia to be closer to her. John argued that constant presence near Valentina would help him overcome his insecurity and jealousy. He also expressed a desire to marry her and start a family. This unexpected proposal, and apparent readiness for serious life changes, impressed Valentina. After long deliberation, and under the influence of emotions, Valentina decided to give their relationship another chance. She agreed to live together, hoping that proximity would help resolve their problems and strengthen their connection. At the beginning of 2023, John implemented his plan to move to Colombia. On January 19th, he arrived in Bogotá, renting an apartment in a prestigious residential complex for 4 days. This short rental period would later raise suspicions among investigators. On January 20th, John rented a gray Volkswagen Voyage car and helped Valentina move her things to the new apartment. Valentina was full of enthusiasm about their life together, as evidenced by a video call to her mother, during which she conducted a virtual tour of the new home. That same evening, the couple visited the Nexus nightclub, where Valentina was to perform as a DJ. Witnesses saw them together. They seemed happy and slightly tipsy, but not drunk. However, some eyewitnesses noticed that John looked jealous due to the attention Valentina was receiving from other club visitors. Valentina's last known public appearance occurred late on January 20th, when she and John were returning to their apartment. Surveillance cameras recorded them entering the building together. The events that took place on the night of January 20th to 21st remain the subject of investigation and trial. However, based on evidence and testimony, it's possible to reconstruct the likely course of events. According to the forensic examination, Valentina's death occurred on Saturday, January 21st. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation and injuries from blunt force trauma. Numerous bruises were found on Valentina's body, particularly on the neck, face, and forearms. Abrasions in the mouth indicated the particular brutality of the attack. The fact that Valentina was found in a nightgown suggests that the attack occurred when she was asleep or preparing for sleep. This may also explain why she was unable to defend herself effectively. The motive for the crime, according to the investigation's version, could have been John's jealousy. He may have learned about Valentina's relationship with another man, Santiago Luna, whom she had been seeing since November 2022. This information likely became the catalyst for John's outburst of anger. It's important to note that these details are based on evidence collected by the investigation and the final picture of events can only be established during the trial process. On January 22, 2023, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the lives of many people changed forever. A homeless person, searching for something valuable in trash bins near the El Dorado International Airport in Bogota, made a gruesome discovery. The man came across a large blue suitcase that turned out to be unusually heavy. When he tried to open it, he saw that it was carefully wrapped with duct tape. Cutting through the tape, he found a white garbage bag with bloodstains inside. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the homeless man immediately reported the find to the authorities. The police quickly arrived at the scene and cordoned off the area. Upon detailed inspection, they discovered that inside the suitcase was the body of a young woman. Next to the body in the suitcase, a small black box with personal belongings was found, including a student ID and a paper identification card. These documents helped quickly identify the victim as Valentina Tres Palacios. The discovery of Valentina's body marked the beginning of a large-scale investigation. Bogota police immediately began collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. The first step was to establish a chronology of the last days of Valentina's life. Investigators turned to Valentina's family and friends to obtain information about her last contacts and plans. Particular attention was drawn to the fact that Valentina did not show up for a scheduled performance at the Nexus Club on Saturday, January 21st. An important witness was Valentina's manager, Pablo Silva. He reported that he couldn't contact her for a day, which was extremely uncharacteristic of her. It was Pablo who first called Valentina's mother, Laura Hidalgo, informing her of the tragedy. Investigators also focused on collecting video materials from surveillance cameras in the area where the body was found, as well as from places Valentina had visited in recent days. Special attention was paid to recordings from the residential complex where she lived with John. Analysis of Valentina's mobile phone, found along with her belongings, revealed numerous missed calls from Pablo and other contacts, confirming the unusualness of her disappearance. From the very beginning of the investigation, the main attention of investigators was focused on John Poulos, given his close relationship with Valentina and the fact that he was the last person to see her alive. His sudden departure from Colombia on the day the body was discovered only intensified suspicions. When the police began investigating Valentina's death, John Poulos was already implementing his escape plan. On January 22nd, the same day the body was discovered, John left Colombia, boarding a flight to Panama. His actions indicated careful preparation. John closed all his social media pages and turned off his phone, complicating attempts to contact him. He had $7,000 in cash and several bank cards with him. John's plan was complex and well thought out. From Panama, he planned to fly to Istanbul and from there to Montenegro. The choice of Montenegro was not random. This country does not have an extradition treaty with Colombia, which theoretically could protect him from prosecution. To confuse his trail, John purchased tickets for different flights. He had tickets not only to Istanbul, but also to São Paulo in Brazil. All tickets were purchased with cash, making them difficult to trace. These actions by John immediately drew the attention of investigators and made him the main suspect in the case. Colombian authorities declared him wanted and established a reward of 20 million Colombian pesos, approximately $4,500 for information about his whereabouts. John Poulos' escape turned into an international operation for his detention. Colombian police cooperated with Interpol and law enforcement agencies of other countries to track his movements. Thanks to quick and coordinated actions by the authorities, John was detained at the Panama airport. The dramatic arrest occurred literally minutes before he was to board a flight to Istanbul. During the detention, a significant amount of cash and several credit cards were found on John. Additionally, scratches were noticeable on his face, which, according to investigators' assumptions, could have been traces of a struggle with Valentina. John's attempt to explain his escape proved unconvincing. He claimed he was fleeing from the Medellin cartel, which was allegedly responsible for Valentina's death and was now pursuing him. This version was quickly dismissed by investigators as implausible. John's detention in Panama became a key moment in the investigation. It not only prevented his possible disappearance, but also provided the investigation with important evidence and the opportunity to conduct a detailed interrogation of the suspect. Just a day after his detention, on January 26th, John Paulos was extradited to Colombia. There he appeared before the court, where he was charged with the murder of Valentina Tres Palacios and concealment of evidence. On January 26, 2023, John Paulos was extradited to Colombia. His arrival in Bogotá was accompanied by heightened security measures. Police and journalists waited at the airport for the murder suspect to be let off the plane. The first images of John after extradition showed a man with noticeable scratches on his face, confirming the observations made during his detention in Panama. These scratches became an important element of the evidence base, as they could indicate a struggle with the victim. After arrival, John was immediately taken to a detention center for initial interrogations. During these interrogations, he continued to insist on his innocence, repeating the version about being pursued by a cartel. However, investigators quickly found inconsistencies in his story. John's lawyers immediately began to build a defense strategy, emphasizing problems with translation and claiming that their client did not understand the nature of the charges due to the language barrier. This tactic was aimed at prolonging the judicial process and creating grounds for possible appeals in the future. Parallel to John's interrogations, investigators continued to collect and analyze evidence. A key element of the investigation became the recordings from surveillance cameras installed in the residential complex where John and Valentina lived. The video recordings showed how on January 19th, John checks into the apartment with a blue suitcase, which later becomes the instrument of the crime. On January 20th, cameras recorded the couple entering the building together, which was the last time Valentina was seen alive. Particular attention was drawn to footage from the early morning of January 22nd. It shows John wheeling out a heavy blue suitcase covered with a blanket on a cart. He loads it into the rented car with obvious difficulty, indicating the significant weight of the contents. Further recordings showed the route of John's car through the city, including a stop near the place where Valentina's body was later found. These video evidences became key in establishing the chronology of events and John's connection to the crime. The forensic examination also provided important evidence. Analysis of Valentina's body confirmed that death occurred from strangulation, and numerous bruises and abrasions indicated a brutal attack. Experts suggested that the attacker might have received scratches from the victim's nails, which corresponded to the injuries found on John's face. This evidence, along with John's sudden escape and his inconsistent explanations, created a solid basis for the prosecution in the murder of Valentina Tres Palacios. During the investigation, new details of Valentina's personal life emerged, shedding light on possible motives for the crime. Investigators discovered that since November 2022, Valentina had been maintaining a romantic relationship with a successful businessman, Santiago Luna. Santiago, who lived in a luxurious penthouse and owned a fleet of expensive cars, represented an alternative to Valentina's relationship with John. These relations remained a secret from John, but as investigators suspect, he might have learned about them shortly before the tragedy. Analysis of Valentina's correspondence with friends showed that she was planning to end her relationship with John. She complained about his controlling behavior and expressed doubts about their future due to the large age difference. These facts allowed the investigation to form a theory about the motive for the crime. Probably John, upon learning about Valentina's intentions to leave him and about her relationship with another man, acted under the influence of strong jealousy and anger. On January 28, 2023, the first court hearing in the case of John Paulos took place. The session attracted significant public and media attention, turning into a high-profile event in Colombia. At the hearing, John was officially presented with charges of murdering Valentina Tres Palacios and concealing evidence. Prosecutors emphasized the brutality of the crime and presented the court with key evidence, including surveillance camera footage and results of the forensic examination. John's defense immediately began to apply delaying tactics. The lawyers filed a complaint about the alleged illegal detention of their client at the Panama airport, claiming that his rights were violated. They also insisted on translation problems, stating that John did not understand the essence of the charges due to the language barrier. John's behavior during the hearing raised additional questions. He laughed at inappropriate moments, which prompted the judge to reprimand him. This was seen by many as a sign of disrespect for the court and the seriousness of the situation. Prosecutors presented a theory that John had planned the crime in advance. They drew attention to the short rental period of the apartment, only 4 days, which contradicted his promises to Valentina about long-term cohabitation. The trial promised to be long and complex, given the seriousness of the charges and the international nature of the case. John faced up to 40 years in prison if found guilty. The murder of Valentina Tres Palacios caused wide resonance in Colombian society and beyond. This tragedy raised important questions about women's safety, toxic relationships, and feminism. Numerous civic organizations organized memorial events for Valentina, drawing attention to the problem of violence against women. Hashtags in support of domestic violence victims appeared on social media, as well as calls to strengthen legislation in this area. Valentina's story became a catalyst for many women who began sharing their own experiences of toxic relationships and violence. This led to an increase in the number of appeals to crisis centers and support hotlines. Media coverage of the case was intensive, with detailed analysis of Valentina and John's relationship. Psychology and sociology experts discussed signs of toxic relationships that could be noticed in their history, emphasizing the importance of early recognition of warning signals. The case also sparked discussions about safety on social media and dating apps, as it was through Tinder that Valentina met John. This led to calls for strengthening security measures on such platforms. The tragic death of Valentina Tres Palacios had a significant impact on Colombia's club and entertainment industry. Event organizers and club owners began to review their security policies, especially regarding the protection of female workers. Many clubs introduced new security protocols, including enhanced visitor control and the creation of safe zones for women. Some establishments began offering special training for staff on recognizing signs of dangerous behavior and responding to potential threats. In the music community, initiatives to support women DJs and performers emerged. Festivals and concerts dedicated to Valentina's memory were organized, featuring exclusively female artists. The fashion industry, in which Valentina also worked, responded by creating campaigns against violence against women. Some brands launched special collections, with part of the profits directed to support organizations fighting domestic violence. This tragedy also affected the perception of the DJ profession in Colombia. Many began to realize the risks faced by women in this field, especially when it comes to late-night performances and interaction with strangers. Overall, Valentina's death became a turning point for many aspects of Colombia's entertainment industry, prompting serious changes and rethinking approaches to safety and equality.
Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Crime Story Diaries. Today we'll be examining a terrifying case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. Christine Johnson was born in 1981 in Santa Clara, California. She was the younger child in the family of Teresa and Kirk Johnson. Christine had an older brother, Derek, who was a few years her senior. Shortly after Christine's birth, the family decided to move from California to the small town of Saugatuck, located in the state of Michigan. Saugatuck was a quiet and picturesque place with a population of less than 1,000 people. It was a cozy and beautiful town with a quiet harbor. It seemed like the safest place one could find to build a happy future. The crime rate was extremely low. Local residents didn't even lock their doors, not fearing criminals. The local community was based on the fact that everyone knew each other. In childhood, Christine, like many other little girls, dreamed of becoming a princess, beautiful, rich, and famous. She wanted to live happily ever after. like in a fairy tale. These childhood dreams later transformed into ambitions to conquer Hollywood and become famous. The Johnson family seemed close-knit and happy. However, the family idyll was disrupted when the Johnsons decided to divorce. This happened when Christine was about 12 years old. Despite the divorce, the parents remained on good terms for the sake of the children. Christine and her brother lived alternately with their father and mother, as required by the custody plan. Due to this situation, the girl quickly became involved in household chores. She started helping her mother from the age of 12. This included managing the family budget. Christine tried to get any job to be independent and not ask her parents for money. Later, her older brother joined the army, after which he decided to become a career military man. At this time, the girl was studying in high school. Having become independent, Christine took her life into her own hands. Her intelligence and natural beauty helped her in this. She was very cheerful, fun, and an interesting conversationalist. Christine looked great, partly due to her active and healthy lifestyle. Her loved ones admired the girl's beauty and advised her to conquer Hollywood. Christine loved sailing, surfing, and everything related to water the most. She engaged in these sports when she visited California to see her grandmother. However, upon returning to Michigan, Christine always missed her favorite hobbies, and she needed time to readjust. In Saugatuck, she was passionate about theater, being a member of a small acting club. During the winter, the girl worked as a waitress in a local cafe. She became a real find for the establishment's owner, as she was very sweet, polite, and sociable, which attracted more visitors. At this time, the girl increasingly thought about leaving their tiny town of Saugatuck. The calm atmosphere of the province was not for her. Christine believed she deserved more and wanted a different life than serving food in a cafe. She felt there were no great prospects for her in this town. In 1999, she graduated from high school. Finally, she had enough freedom to start building her life and her path to success. After considering her situation, the girl decided to set off in search of herself. She traveled to different cities, worked there, and tried her hand at various fields of activity. Eventually, she decided to settle in California in 2000, which she loved so much. Here, the climate was wonderful, and there were many more opportunities to realize her potential. At first, she moved in with her grandmother in the small resort town of Santa Maria, with a population of 100,000 people. But despite being close to all her favorite entertainments, Christine first focused on important matters. First of all, she started looking for a job to support herself. This was very important to her. The girl got a job as a system administrator in the city's electric power company. Then she focused on her education. She decided to enroll at the University of California. The educational institution was quite far, a 40-minute drive from her grandmother's house. Christine was admitted there and bought a car with the money she had earned earlier. But even with a car, driving so far was a problem. It took a lot of the girl's time. Therefore, Christine began to look for work closer. This is how she first touched her dream Hollywood. She managed to get a part-time job with a film crew that was planning to shoot a movie. Her experience performing in the theater group allowed her to fit into the new work environment. As a result, she was hired as an assistant on the set of a thriller. Here she met people who lived and breathed Hollywood. It was a real star moment for the girl from the province. She communicated with world-famous actors and directors and was incredibly happy. Christine simply couldn't believe that she was interacting with celebrities. She was literally absorbed by the world of cinema. This work inspired her so much that young Christine wanted to be closer to this field of activity. She enrolled in professional makeup courses where Hollywood makeup artists taught her. Having mastered these skills, she thought about becoming a makeup artist on a film set. For this, she was going to go to the city of her dreams, Los Angeles. Although it was quite a risky journey, curiosity was stronger than the fear of the unknown. The girl was drawn to Hollywood. As a result, she moved to Los Angeles, where several famous film studios are located. It was a real period of temptation for the young beauty, but she demonstrated the best rules of decency that a young girl is capable of. She did not lead a dissolute lifestyle, despite the popular trends in the community in which she found herself. She avoided parties and gatherings. The girl was quite modest. She had a boyfriend named Todd, whom she had met a couple of years ago, and they continued to communicate despite the distance. Then he moved in with her, and they decided to rent an apartment together in Los Angeles, starting in 2002. The young people did not yet have financial stability, so this was beneficial for both of them. It was not an easy adventure, but the girl did not despair and began to look for a new job for permanent employment. However, this was difficult. The girl only found various part-time jobs. There was no serious work. Most of their budget was earned by her boyfriend. Meanwhile, the relationship between Christine and Todd was getting worse and worse. Later, Christine complained to her mother that verbal arguments with her boyfriend increasingly ended with his physical impact. She fell into the trap of a toxic relationship that was financially constrained. Her mother began to look for a new place for her daughter so that she could move out. Christine ran away from her boyfriend, settling in a small apartment. She continued to study remotely. During this time, her father provided Christine with good financial support. He hoped that his daughter would finally find her place and calling in life, so he wanted to help her. By November 2002, Christine finally got a job at a mobile communications company, but this position was far from her ideals. Neither the field of activity nor the income met her expectations. In addition, the girl still could not find a normal place to live close to work. Her mother found a cozy house in Santa Monica, a town neighboring Los Angeles, which was to be shared with 2 other girls. However, it was located next to the beach in a lively residential area. It was an ideal place to get on her feet, so Christine moved there. During this period, the girl transferred to Santa Monica University. Christine's dreams of Hollywood did not come true. She couldn't start building a career. Her relationship fell apart. She literally started her life from scratch. But the girl did not despair and continued to pursue her dream. On February 15, 2003, Christine was planning to go to a party. Beforehand, the young beauty went to the mall. She talked a lot with her mother on the phone, discussing plans for the future with her. Her mother, Terry, told her to choose a Valentine's Day gift for herself. This was the last call to loved ones that Christine made. The next day, on Sunday, February 16, 2003, her mother was waiting for a call from her daughter to tell her about the previous day. But the girl didn't get in touch. The woman tried to call her herself, but the phone was unavailable. At first, this didn't cause much concern, as her daughter could have been resting or at work and not hearing the call. However, the next day, February 17th, Christine still didn't get in touch. Around 9 o'clock in the morning, the woman called her daughter's workplace. She was always on the phone and answering, but this time her mother was answered by an answering machine. Then the mother called her manager, who said that the girl had not come to work. He also emphasized that Christine was a very reliable employee and had no delays or absences in the last 3 months. So her absence surprised everyone. However, they also couldn't contact her. According to the manager, the employee was last seen on February 14th. One of her friends at work said that the girl was going to some party. The mother of the missing girl visited her daughter's social media page, but found no useful information about the party there. The girl had not posted any photos from there, although previously she actively maintained her page, literally documenting every step of her life. She also checked the transactions on her daughter's bank accounts, but since she stopped communicating, no transactions had been made. The mother called all the hospitals, but Christine was not registered anywhere. After this, on February 17th, the mother decided to call the Santa Monica Police Department and reported the disappearance of her 21-year-old daughter. Investigators checked whether a similar girl had been involved in traffic accidents during these days, but nothing could be found. The neighbors of the young beauty also hadn't heard anything about her after her disappearance. The police contacted her ex-boyfriend Todd, with whom she had had a rather turbulent and sometimes violent romance. They considered the version that he might have found his runaway lover and done something to her, but he denied seeing her. The girl's neighbors gave superficial information that they had seen Christine on Saturday, February 15th, and she was going to a party, but they didn't know who she was going with or where exactly. The missing girl's colleagues had earlier told her mother about this. This was the first lead in the case, and investigators began to check this information. Later, a new detective joined the case. As soon as he opened the collected records, the photo of the missing girl struck him. The crime victim looked very similar to another previously missing girl who was found dead in 1995. That girl was an aspiring model, and she was invited to a photo shoot for the glossy magazine Photographer. But this photo shoot was not destined to happen. The victim's name was Linda Sobeck, and her killer was photographer Charles Rathbun. He deceptively lured the beautiful blonde out of town where he raped and killed her. But the policeman also knew that Linda's killer was already in prison at this time and physically could not be involved in this case. However, it could be a copycat of Charles, who was inspired by his ingenuity and acted according to his scheme. The detectives had to get at least something related to the girl, so her car, a white Mazda Miata, was put on the wanted list. In parallel, while communicating with the mother, the investigators found out more details about the girl's ex-boyfriend Todd and also learned about her new boyfriend named Lucas. However, the mother knew very little about Lucas. She didn't even know his last name, which complicated the search. More than 48 hours had passed, and this is a critical period for searching for missing persons. The police seriously assumed that Christine might already be dead. They began to study the billing data of the missing girl's mobile phone. It became known that the last outgoing call from her phone was made at 5:34 p.m. on February 15th. She called the directory service at number 411, which could mean that she was in trouble, trying to clarify an address or phone number. The dialogue lasted about 3 minutes, which means it could have been quite important communication for the police case. But it was impossible to find out the exact content of the conversation, as these calls were not recorded. After this call, the girl's mobile phone discharged. The last time its location was recorded was in the area of Ventura Boulevard. After this, the police contacted the media to involve them in the investigation. The headlines immediately featured news about Christine's disappearance with a hint of similarity to Linda's murder. Investigators searched the apartment where Christine lived, looking for possible clues. They found a receipt from a lingerie store dated February 15th, when the girl disappeared. The police found out that Christine continued to communicate with her ex-boyfriend despite his aggressive behavior. She sometimes visited him, and the last visit took place on February 7th. But the first truly serious lead was discovered by detectives while examining information from the missing girl's email. On February 13th, Christine sent a message to the coordinator who was organizing the party. In it, she noted that she was looking forward to the event and was going to buy a ticket. She was informed that all seats were sold out, but they put her on a special waiting list. This is a common tactic when organizers of such events with celebrities want to deceive visitors and offer them VIP tickets at an inflated price. The police eventually found Christine's new boyfriend Lucas and talked to him. He said that he last saw Christine on February 14th, the day before her disappearance. They spent the evening watching a movie together and then said goodbye. The young man successfully passed a polygraph test, had an alibi, and did not arouse any suspicion from the investigators. After this, the detective spoke with her ex-boyfriend Todd, but he also had an alibi. The guy was out of town, which was confirmed by several people. Of all the versions, the police were most interested in the party that Christine was heading to and did not return from. They believed that the key to solving the girl's disappearance lay here. The investigators contacted the event organizers and were shocked. It turned out that Christine did not buy a ticket and did not show up at this party. But where could she have gone then? To reconstruct the timeline of events on that fateful evening, the police checked the transactions paid with the missing girl's bank card. Thanks to this, law enforcement officers learned about and checked all the stores where Christine had been that day. They looked for recordings from surveillance cameras that could have captured unusual events or some clues. This check took a lot of time. While the police were studying all the information, an alarming call came into the police. A woman named Susan Murphy reported a suspicious person. She told a brief story about meeting a man named Victor Thomas in a store, who posed as a representative of a film company that was conducting a casting for a new James Bond movie. She said that he pressured her, invited her to the role of Bond girl, admiring her beauty. He urged her to participate in the casting, but she found him suspicious, and the woman managed to refuse at the last moment. As a precaution, her husband, who was a former police officer, went to meet with her. He personally spoke with Victor and tried to get information about the man's intentions. However, Victor fled without providing any valuable information. But Susan checked everything she knew about him, and it turned out that he was lying. Victor Thomas had nothing to do with the film industry. Such a person didn't exist at all. Presumably, the man made up this information, just like Linda Sobek's killer, and in this way wanted to meet a beautiful girl, but for unknown purposes. Although Susan's story ended well, Victor was still at large and could continue his schemes. Therefore, this information needed to be urgently verified, and Victor needed to be found. He might have had evil intentions. Investigators checked all the stores where Christine had shopped on the day of her disappearance, checked the camera recordings, but found nothing interesting. Then they decided to go around the stores and talk to the staff. In conversation with the sellers, the police gave a description of Victor, who was harassing beautiful girls. And in one of the stores, the seller said she had seen a similar person, but the woman couldn't give any more valuable clues. An artist arrived at the scene to compose a sketch of the suspect. The search for Christine was gaining momentum. The police sent dogs and volunteers to the area where she had last made contact and called the directory service. Patrols and volunteers, meanwhile, were looking for the car and the missing girl herself. The police received many reports that a similar car had been seen somewhere, but all of this turned out to be false. On February 24th, an important call finally came to the police. In the parking lot located near the shopping center where Christine had been shopping, they found her car, a white Mazda Miata. A forensic expert arrived at the scene, conducted a thorough examination, collected fingerprints and all the evidence he could find. Inside the cabin in the back was a bottle of water. They also found the missing girl's mobile phone on the front seat. But the real surprise awaited the investigators when they spoke with the parking lot security guard. The man remembered that there had been a small incident with this car. The car arrived at the spot at 5:45 p.m., but it was reserved for another client. A man got out of the car and, upon learning this, behaved aggressively in response to the guard's warning. He simply threw the car keys at him and left without any explanation. There was no one in the car. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras in the parking lot, so it was impossible to see the car driver. There were no leads, so the detectives returned to analyzing the girl's purchases that day and were stunned. On the day of her disappearance, Christine bought an outfit that was identical to the one described by Susan. When Victor invited her to the casting, he asked Susan to buy the shortest black miniskirt possible, a white shirt, stockings, and shoes. All these items were paid for with Christine's bank card. The police couldn't believe it was a coincidence, which meant she could have fallen for the scammer's bait, whose intentions remained unclear. Almost the same as Susan did, but fortunately, she was accompanied by her husband. However, there was no information about Victor, and the investigators didn't know how to track him down. The police again turned to the girls with whom the missing girl lived. They remembered that Christine was indeed going to some casting, but they couldn't remember the details. During the conversation, they recalled that it was definitely related to James Bond. They said that Christine was very excited about this event, and the description of her outfit in which she left home, a shirt and mini skirt, exactly matched the officers' concerns. Christine was afraid of being late for the audition, which was scheduled for 5:30 p.m. She was in that same revealing outfit that the villain Susan had asked to wear, and probably Christine. Detectives continued to review the camera footage over and over again to find Victor, and finally managed to find him in the store where employees mentioned him. But the quality of the material was so poor that facial features could not be discerned. However, this was already a lead. With the help of witness testimonies, investigators could reconstruct the probable appearance of the criminal. By February 26th, a composite sketch of the main suspect in the disappearance of the young beauty was compiled. One of the experienced detectives who reviewed the case materials recognized Victor Paleologos in it, who had recently been released on parole, namely on January 20th, 2003. He had previously been convicted of a sex crime. In his turbulent criminal past, there was an episode when he lured a woman named Christine Clujan to his apartment in exactly the same way. He invited her to a party where there would be many celebrities. When she arrived, it was quiet and empty. He began to harass her, and when the woman resisted, he attacked. The criminal used a rope, strangled her, and then wanted to tie her up to rape her. However, the victim gathered her strength, broke free, ran out of the apartment, and was able to ask the neighbors for help. Victor Paleologus used the same bait for his victims in the form of promises to conduct a casting or participate in a party. This was his standard scheme. Here, near the Walk of Fame, it worked flawlessly. Many girls came to Los Angeles in search of their Hollywood dream, and criminals took advantage of this. The first time the criminal got away with attacking a girl with just a suspended sentence. Then there was an attempt to rape Katie DeBuono in 1998, where he introduced himself as Brian, a film producer. For this attack, he got off with a very short term. There were also grounds to believe that he was involved in embezzlement of funds in the company where he had previously worked. In addition, many other victims were identified, women whom he tried to rape. However, all complaints to the police somehow got him off the hook because the victims had no evidence. Once he attacked an ex-girlfriend when he broke into her house. This was also an unsuccessful crime of a sexual nature. But the criminal took money and valuables from the apartment. But even this crime went unpunished. He got off with just a suspended sentence. Later, there was a more serious episode. He lured a girl named Heather into a trap. As with others, he persuaded her to dress in a manner that apparently excited him the most. Then he tried to tie her up and rape her. The girl managed to break free. Somehow she pushed the criminal away with the sharp heel of her shoe. This gave her a few seconds to run out and get to her car. She reported him to the police. For this crime, Victor received 2 years. But on January 20th, 2003, he was released on parole. This was just 3 weeks before Christine's disappearance. It turned out that, barely released, the criminal was back to his old ways. By the time the police began hunting for him, he was already under arrest. This time, he had stolen a BMW X5 from Beverly Hills and was trying to sell it with fake documents. After being detained in the theft case, they found a wallet on him with a whole bunch of stolen IDs, credit cards, and other documents. Victor Paleologus matched the type of criminal in the case of Christine's disappearance and also acted according to the same scheme. Everything added up. Therefore, the police decided to show his photo to Susan, who had managed to avoid being attacked thanks to her husband. At the police station, the girl immediately chose his photo among others, and then at the identification, she also singled him out and said that she immediately recognized Victor, although it was obvious that he tried to change his appearance. The man slouched a bit, extended one arm longer than the other, arranged his hair differently, but the deception was uncovered. In a separate check, Susan's husband, who had tried to detain the criminal, also recognized him. Unfortunately, the parking lot guard where the missing girl's car was found couldn't identify the criminal, as he saw him quickly from afar, in the dark, and didn't get a good look at his face. Victor was behind bars at that moment, but on the day of Christine's disappearance, he was free. During the interrogation, the criminal denied any involvement in Christine's disappearance and denied communicating with Susan, although there was all evidence to the contrary. Victor refused to talk to the detectives without a lawyer. He cited that he had recently been released on parole and was afraid that they wanted to frame him. Therefore, the investigators were gathering evidence against him. Soon, a new witness appeared. It was a real estate agent who had been working with Victor for the last few weeks and found his behavior strange. The suspect was looking for a house worth up to $700,000 through him. They visited several properties every day. This continued until news came about the disappearance of documents and keys from one of these houses. However, the realtor at that time didn't even think that his client could be the thief. Now, when he saw his photo in the police report, everything fell into place. The witness also identified the criminal. According to him, they last met just a day before Christine's disappearance. On this day, Victor behaved strangely. He was somewhat nervous. In one of the houses shown, he went to the toilet and shouted from there, apparently checking the soundproofing. The police suggested that in this way he could be selecting a place with good soundproofing for committing crimes. The police examined each of the houses that the perpetrator had visited. First of all, this house, to which Victor paid special attention. As it turned out, this house was located in the area where the missing girl's phone was last pinged, which was also suspicious. The police were looking for traces, any evidence that could point to Christine. Perhaps her body was in the house, but they found nothing. Meanwhile, searches were also going on in his apartment. Photos of women in his favorite outfit were found on Victor's computer. It was the same miniskirt, white shirt, stockings, and high-heeled shoes. By this time, the investigation had been going on for 12 days. But the family of the missing girl still hoped for her return home alive. And Victor kept denying everything, and was in no hurry to share information with the detectives. He only confirmed that he had seen Christine, but then she left, and the man didn't see her anymore. Victor Paleologus was born in 1962 in Pennsylvania. He had an ordinary family. The man was the youngest of 5 brothers, entered college and received a bachelor's degree, after which he went to Los Angeles to study in graduate school. He was married from 90 to 93. Interestingly, there are grounds to believe that the criminal tried to poison his wife in 1991 when she reported him. His attempts to organize a restaurant business failed. The image of a man offended by the whole world who had fallen into crime was emerging. His fetish with beautiful women probably forced him to cross a dangerous line, and he began to attack them for the purpose of rape. Regarding the evening when Christine disappeared, the criminal, together with his lawyer, provided an alibi. Victor was meeting a friend at a restaurant. They were having dinner. This information was indeed confirmed. But the police knew that despite this, he had enough time to play out another drama with a new victim and kidnap her. On March 1st, the police received a call from a new witness. The man claimed that on February 15th, he had seen the missing girl. She allegedly stopped near his house and was looking for a mansion that looked like a castle. The man himself didn't know where it was, but his wife heard the conversation and told her where to go. This happened around 5:30 p.m. Now it became clear what the call to Foroneon was about. The girl was trying to find the way to a house that looked like a castle and called the directory. The police had a new lead, a house that looked like a castle. It was in a similar house that Victor was checking the soundproofing. Everything pointed to him. While the investigators were working with this information, a new event occurred. On March 3, 2003, 4 teenagers were walking through the Hollywood Hills. They were admiring the beautiful view of Los Angeles from the height when one of them approached the edge and saw a strange object about 100 meters below. The teenagers began to peer. It seemed to them that it looked like a mannequin. The boys began to descend but couldn't reach it. However, they got close enough to understand that it wasn't a mannequin, but a human body. The young witnesses couldn't decide for a long time what to do, as they didn't take mobile phones with them. They decided to head to the police and on the way met a woman who was walking dogs. The teenagers told her about the creepy find. She managed to get closer to make sure it was true. The victim's legs were tied and wrapped in blue fabric. She was wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt. The hands were tied behind the back, and on the right wrist remained a hair tie. Below the waist were torn stockings. The woman was frightened by what she saw and called the police. Soon, police officers and rescuers arrived at the scene, who with great difficulty were able to retrieve the body from the Hollywood Hills. Presumably, the criminal hoped that the body would never be found here. This might have happened if it weren't for the curious teenagers who accidentally wandered into such a hard-to-reach area. The forensic expert was able to identify the body as the missing Christine Johnson. The victim was found near the house that Victor had liked so much during the viewing with the realtor. The police informed Christine's parents about the tragedy. They were beside themselves with the pain of loss. Multiple bruises and scratches were found all over the murdered girl's body, indicating her desperate resistance. The condition of the body was poor. It had significantly decomposed, having been in the heat for many days. Also, it had rained for one day. The face was especially unrecognizable due to numerous injuries, and also because the head was tilted down. The girl had a large bruise on her head and in the neck area. They were the result of a skull injury and strangulation, which were considered the cause of death. The detectives were sure that Victor Paleologus was behind the murder. However, they needed to prove that Victor really didn't have an alibi at the time of death. For this, the police went to his friend Joey, with whom he supposedly had dinner that evening. However, it turned out that it wasn't a friend, but an acquaintance. Upon detailed questioning, it also turned out that they were supposed to meet much later than the time when the meeting with Christine took place. According to the acquaintance, they met Victor by chance the day before. On February 15th, he was late for the meeting, arriving around midnight, although they were supposed to meet much earlier. Victor had scratches on his face, which he explained as an accidental injury during the move. The police approximately reconstructed the chain of events that preceded Christine Johnson's disappearance. According to the investigation, he picked up his victim at the shopping center where he often prowled. The man saw a beautiful young girl and decided to act. As usual, he introduced himself to her as a film industry worker and offered the girl to audition for the role of James Bond's girl. He was very convincing in this. Acting according to his scheme, Victor paid the girl many compliments and explained that she was perfect for this role. Given the ambitions and youth of the young beauty, she believed the villain and couldn't refuse. The criminal arranged a meeting in one of the houses he had visited with the realtor, explaining that the casting was taking place there. Christine, suspecting that she had fallen into a trap, prepared for the casting, dressing in the clothes the perpetrator had asked for, and arrived at the place with a slight delay as she got lost on the way and contacted the directory service. This is how she fell into a deadly trap from which she never escaped. At the meeting, she became the object of harassment, but put up desperate resistance, scratching his face. She had nowhere to run, and the man still turned out to be stronger. So Victor overcame her, raped the girl and killed her so that she wouldn't report him. First, he hit her on the head and strangled her, and then threw the body in the Hollywood Hills. The most terrible thing was that the blunt head trauma and strangulation did not cause her death immediately. She only lost consciousness, and the criminal thought she was dead. When the killer dropped her on the rocks, she fell from a considerable height and received even more injuries. Then she regained consciousness. Christine was slowly and painfully dying in this place, never receiving help, and only after some time did the victim die. On May 12, 2003, the district attorney brought charges against Victor, accusing him of kidnapping, rape, and first-degree murder. However, the defense was fully prepared to defend the client's freedom because there was no direct evidence against him. The prosecution faced a difficult battle, so forensic experts used all the most weighty arguments. The defense disputed the time of death, pointing to insects found on the body. However, all the similarities with previous victims and attacks that the criminal had were voiced. These cases were so identical that they simply had to be highlighted in court. Preparation for the trial dragged on, so Victor Paleologus appeared before the court only in July 2006. The defense emphasized that the prosecution had virtually no physical evidence. No DNA, fingerprints, surveillance camera recordings linking Victor to the victim. This was explained by the fact that the body was found 2 weeks after the disappearance, and during this time it had decomposed significantly, so all evidence was destroyed. However, when all the witnesses accusing Victor of harassment spoke at the trial, the advantage was on the side of the prosecution. They all talked about how experienced a manipulator the man was. He was so convincing that even the most distrustful, like Susan Murphy, initially believed him and agreed to participate in the casting, not suspecting what awaited them. It seemed that no one had any doubts that this was his handwriting, and it was the defendant who killed Christine. Therefore, the criminal used his trump card. To avoid the death penalty, he decided to make a deal with the prosecution and plead guilty to a lesser crime. Now it remained for the victim's loved ones to accept this deal. At that moment, the trial had already been going on for 3 weeks and was making little progress. Its outcome was uncertain. After all the grief experienced, the family of the deceased was willing to make concessions to bring him to justice. However, on the day of the verdict, the defendant wrote an 11-page petition to the judge asking to withdraw his guilty plea. Fortunately for everyone, it was no longer possible to cancel it. Victor Paleologos was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment with the right to parole after 25 years. This case left a deep mark on the lives of everyone involved, from Christine's family and friends to the investigators and witnesses who helped bring her killer to justice. Traditionally, thank you for watching and remind you that it would be great if you support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel.
Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Crime Story Diaries. Today, we'll be examining a terrifying case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. From the promising arrival of Lauren Kanarek, an aspiring dressage rider with Olympic dreams of her own, to the gradual descent into paranoia and violence, this story serves as a cautionary tale about the pressures of elite sports, the power of social media, and the devastating consequences when disputes spiral out of control. Michael Barrasone, born on August 17, 1964 in the United States, grew up riding horses in upstate New York. His passion for equestrian sports, particularly dressage, began at a young age and would shape the course of his entire life. Dressage, a highly disciplined form of horse riding, requires perfect coordination between horse and rider. It involves executing a series of predetermined movements, often described as a dance between horse and human. Barrasone's talent and dedication to the sport became evident early on. He spent years honing his skills, understanding that success in dressage requires patience and constant improvement. As he often said, you can't take a horse out in a dressage sport. You can show up and in 5 rides be the world champion. It takes 2 years of rides to be the world champion. His hard work paid off, and Barrasone's competitive career was marked by significant achievements. In 1997, he won a gold medal as a member of the Nations Cup team, a prestigious international equestrian competition. This victory established him as one of the top dressage riders in the United States. The pinnacle of Barrasone's competitive career came in 2008, when he represented the USA as an alternate in the Beijing Olympic Games. This accomplishment solidified his status as one of America's elite dressage riders. Following his Olympic appearance, Barrasone's reputation in the equestrian community soared. In 2009, he was awarded the Sportsman International Horseman of the Year, a testament to his skill and contribution to the sport. After the 2016 Olympic Games in Brazil, Barrasone's fame reached new heights. Multiple competitors he had trained or coached won medals, showcasing his exceptional ability not just as a rider, but as a coach and mentor. This success led to an explosion in demand for his services. Throughout his career, Barrasone was known for his flamboyant personality, positivity, determination, and competitive spirit. Those who worked with him described him as a supportive but direct coach, driven by a genuine love for his sport. His passion was evident in every aspect of his work, from training horses to mentoring riders. By the age of 54, Barrasone had transformed his personal success into a thriving business. He owned 2 large equestrian facilities, one in Florida, where he could train with the horses during the winter months, and a larger property in New Jersey called Hawthorne Hill Farm. The New Jersey facility was particularly impressive, spanning 53 acres and housing over 40 horses. Hawthorne Hill became the center of Barrasone's operations. It was home to a handful of working dressage students, as well as Barrasone himself, his girlfriend Mary, and an assistant trainer named Justin. The farm was more than just a training facility. It was a testament to Barrasone's lifelong dedication to dressage and his ability to turn his passion into a successful enterprise. Barrasone's coaching style was unique. He didn't exclusively train any of his students, instead working with a team of qualified coaches to provide comprehensive training. This approach allowed him to oversee the development of multiple riders and horses simultaneously, maximizing his impact on the sport. His fame extended beyond the equestrian world. At the height of his popularity, Barrasone appeared on the American satire show, The Colbert Report, where he taught the host about dressage, including its most challenging disciplines like passage horse walking sideways and piaffing fancy prancing. By 2018, Michael Barrison was more than just a successful dressage rider and trainer. He was a legend in the equestrian world, known for his ability to guide both horses and riders to Olympic-level performance. His journey from a young horse enthusiast to an Olympic athlete and renowned trainer was a testament to his skill, dedication, and passion for dressage. Lauren Kanarek's story begins far from the world of elite dressage competition. Born around 1981, Lauren was the daughter of Jonathan Kanarek, a wealthy retired attorney who had spent many years working on Wall Street before starting his own business. Despite her father's background in finance, Lauren's passion lay in the world of horses. From a remarkably young age, Lauren showed an affinity for equestrian activities. Her love affair with horses began when she was just 2 years old on a small horse farm in Wellington, Florida. This early exposure to horses ignited a passion that would shape the course of her life. Recognizing his daughter's enthusiasm, Jonathan Kanarek decided to support Lauren's interest. Despite having no personal involvement in equestrianism himself, he sponsored the construction of a stable on their property and purchased a pony for his young daughter to begin her training. This decision proved to be a turning point in Lauren's life, as she quickly demonstrated a natural ability to handle horses. Lauren's early training focused on dressage, a highly disciplined form of horse riding that requires precise movements and a deep connection between horse and rider. She took to the sport with enthusiasm, showing a particular aptitude for the harmonious movements required in dressage competitions. As she grew older, Lauren's commitment to the sport intensified. She transitioned from ponies to full-sized horses and began participating in amateur competitions. Her dedication paid off, and she started to accumulate achievements in the dressage world. Over the years, she won several national medals at the amateur level, establishing herself as a promising talent in the sport. Despite her success, Lauren was not content with amateur status. She harbored ambitious dreams of competing at an international level and even participating in the Olympic Games. These aspirations drove her to seek out higher levels of training and more challenging competitions. Lauren's pursuit of excellence in dressage was not just a hobby, it became her life's passion. She devoted countless hours to training, constantly working to improve her technique and deepen her connection with her horses. Her father's financial support allowed her to pursue this passion without the constraints that many aspiring athletes face. By 2018, Lauren had become an award-winning rider at the amateur level. However, she recognized that to achieve her Olympic ambitions, she needed to train with the best in the field. It was this drive for improvement that led her to seek out more advanced training opportunities. Lauren's path to elite-level training took a significant turn when she attended a horse competition in Wellington, Florida in 2018. It was here that she encountered Michael Barrison, the former Olympian and highly sought-after dressage trainer. Recognizing the opportunity to learn from one of the best in the field, Lauren was determined to secure a spot as Barrison's student. The meeting with Barrison was a pivotal moment for Lauren. She saw in him the key to unlocking her full potential as a dressage rider. With her father's financial backing and her own determination, Lauren made arrangements to move her horses from North Carolina to Barrison's training facility in Long Valley, New Jersey. This decision represented a significant commitment. Lauren was not just changing trainers, she was uprooting her entire life to pursue her dressage dreams. The move to New Jersey was a testament to her dedication to the sport and her belief that training with Barrison could elevate her skills to a world-class level. As Lauren prepared to begin her training with Barrison, she was filled with hope and ambition. She saw this as her chance to transform from a successful amateur into a potential Olympian. Little did she know that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would dramatically alter both her life and Barrison's in ways neither could have anticipated. In March 2018, Lauren Kanarek began training with Barrison, paying $5,000 monthly for training, horseboarding, and accommodation. She and her boyfriend, Robert Goodwin, lived in the upper-floor apartment of the farmhouse, with Barrison and his girlfriend Mary occupying the main level. The arrangement initially seemed beneficial, with Lauren excited about training with a world-class expert. However, tensions arose when Lauren's expectations of exclusive training with Barrison himself weren't met. The reality of working with assistant trainers like Justin Hardin and Mary Haskins Gray became a source of conflict. By the summer of 2019, approximately a year after Lauren Kanarek had begun training at Hawthorne Hill, the situation had deteriorated significantly. What had started as a promising training arrangement had devolved into a complex web of conflicts and accusations. Lauren's primary source of discontent stemmed from her perception that she was not receiving the level of training she had expected. She felt that she was being tossed to the side and that her presence at Hawthorne Hill was valued only for the money she paid. Lauren was particularly frustrated with the fact that she often trained with Barrison's assistants, Justin Hardin and Mary Haskins Gray, rather than with Barrison himself. This frustration was compounded by Lauren's ambitious nature. She had come to Hawthorne Hill with Olympic aspirations, and she believed that only direct, consistent training with Barrison could help her achieve these goals. However, from Barrison's perspective, it was standard practice for students to work with assistant trainers, especially those who, like Lauren, were still developing their skills. The conflict extended beyond just the training arrangements. Lauren began to clash with other individuals at Hawthorne Hill, particularly Mary Haskins Gray. The two women had very different approaches to their sport, and indeed to most aspects of life at the farm. These differences led to frequent disagreements and a growing sense of tension in the shared living spaces. As her dissatisfaction grew, Lauren began to voice her complaints publicly. She took to social media, particularly Facebook, to air her grievances about life at Hawthorne Hill. Her posts painted an increasingly negative picture of her experience, accusing Barrison of various misdeeds and character flaws. In her social media posts, Lauren described Barrison as a bully. She went further, making serious accusations, calling him racist, anti-Semitic, and using other derogatory terms. These posts were not just expressions of frustration, they were direct attacks on Barrison's character and reputation. Lauren's online activity didn't stop at complaints about her training. She began to make posts that could be interpreted as threatening. In one post, she wrote about going to war, stating, "It's about time to possibly go to war. Anyone who repeatedly kicks a resting beast will eventually wake her up." She referred to her dog, Rosie, as the Night Army, and spoke of attacking with weapons hot. These posts deeply unsettled Barrison and others at the farm. They saw them as not just complaints, but as direct threats to their safety and well-being. Barrison, in particular, became increasingly concerned about the impact these posts could have on his reputation and his business. The situation was further complicated by the living arrangements. Despite the growing tensions, Lauren and Robert continued to live in the farmhouse on Barrison's property. This meant that the conflicting parties were in constant close proximity, with little opportunity to diffuse tensions. By July 2019, the atmosphere at Hawthorne Hill had become untenable. Barrison and his girlfriend Mary had relocated from the farmhouse to the clubhouse room in the stables, sleeping on couches while Lauren and Robert remained in the house. Mary's 11-year-old son, who had been staying with them, was sent back to his father for his own safety. Barrison was increasingly interpreting Lauren's Facebook posts as threatening. He believed that Lauren and Robert were stalking him and Mary on the property, particularly at night. He also suspected that they were listening in on his private conversations. The deterioration of relationships at Hawthorne Hill had reached a critical point. What had begun as a standard training arrangement had transformed into a hostile living situation, with both parties feeling threatened and aggrieved. This toxic atmosphere set the stage for the dramatic events that were to follow. As the summer of 2019 progressed, the conflict between Michael Barrison and Lauren Kanarek escalated significantly, leading to multiple interventions by law enforcement and other authorities. On July 31, 2019, Barrison made his first call to 911. He reported that Lauren and Robert were in the horse barn after 9 p.m., violating a rule he had established. In the call, Barrison referred to them as scumbags and stated that they had chased him out of his house. He requested that the police warn them about their behavior. Just a few days later, on August 3, 2019, Barrison made another call to 911. This time, his tone was more urgent. He told the dispatcher, These people are on our place. They have been living in our house in one of the apartment units. They are clients here at our horse stable. The situation is getting worse and worse and worse. The police have been here twice in the last 3 days. They're nuts. They're stalking us. They're harassing us." During this call, Barrison also mentioned a concerning Facebook post by Lauren. He paraphrased the post as saying, "My split personalities are going to take over and I am not in control of what they do." Barrison expressed fear for his life and that of his family. Lauren, for her part, also contacted the authorities. She called the non-emergency police number to report a suspicious black car driving around the property late at night. She expressed concern about overheard conversations about potential harm to her and Robert. The situation continued to deteriorate. Barrison made a total of 4 emergency calls to the police within a week leading up to August 7, 2019. However, the response from Morris County law enforcement was largely dismissive. They determined the situation to be a civil matter or a private dispute, not a criminal issue, and therefore not worthy of further investigation. In an attempt to resolve the situation, Barrison's attorney sent a letter to Lauren and Robert insisting they vacate the farmhouse. However, Lauren felt she couldn't relocate herself and find accommodations for 5 horses on such short notice. The conflict wasn't limited to just calls to the police. On August 6, 2019, agents from the Washington Township Housing Inspector arrived at the farm in response to a letter from Lauren and Robert claiming multiple code violations. As a result, officials posted notices telling everyone to vacate the premises or face a fine of $5,000 per day. Further complicating matters, Lauren filed or planned to file a formal complaint against Barrison, with multiple governing bodies alleging assault or misconduct. She and Robert also submitted a formal written complaint to SafeSport, an organization that fields allegations of abuse in U.S. Olympic and Paralympic sports. The most serious allegation came on August 7, 2019, when the New Jersey Division of Child Protection and Permanency arrived at the farm to investigate claims that Barrison had abused his girlfriend's children. This visit, which Barrison saw as the coup de grace in Lauren's campaign against him, would prove to be the tipping point in the conflict. The events of August 7, 2019, marked a tragic turning point in the ongoing conflict at Hawthorne Hill Farm. The day began with a visit from the New Jersey Division of Child Protection and Permanency, investigating allegations of child abuse against Michael Barrison. This visit, which Barrison viewed as a false accusation orchestrated by Lauren Kanarick, appears to have been the final straw in their deteriorating relationship. Shortly after the child protection agents left the property, at approximately 2:10 p.m., Barrison went to his office. There, he retrieved a 9mm Ruger pistol from a safe. The gun, described as a lady's gun, belonged to a friend of Barrison's, Dr. Ruth Cox, who also kept horses on the farm. Barrison loaded the weapon and drove his truck to the farmhouse where Lauren and Robert were staying. The exact sequence of events that followed is disputed, with different accounts provided by the involved parties. According to Lauren's testimony, she saw Barrison near some bushes and approached him to talk. She claims that as soon as she began speaking, Barrison pulled out the gun and shot her twice directly in the chest. Robert Goodwin's account corroborates Lauren's version. He stated that he saw Barrison raise the gun and shoot Lauren twice when she was about 4 feet away from him. Robert then claimed that Barrison turned the gun on him and fired a shot, which missed. After the shooting, a physical altercation ensued between Barrison and Robert. Robert testified that he managed to put Barrison in a chokehold, causing him to pass out briefly. During this struggle, Lauren and Robert's dog, Rosie, also became involved, inflicting puncture wounds on Barrison. At 2:13 p.m., Lauren placed a call to 911, reporting that she had been shot and was having difficulty breathing. When police arrived at the scene, they found Lauren with 2 gunshot wounds to her chest. Barrison was on the ground with Robert restraining him, and a 9mm firearm was found near Barrison's left hand. Barrison, for his part, claimed to have no memory of the shooting itself. He remembered retrieving the gun from his office and driving to the farmhouse, but his next memory was of waking up handcuffed to a hospital bed. Despite this claimed memory loss, Police overheard Barrison making statements such as "I had a good life" several times, as well as "They destroyed my life in the last 6 months. They took it all away. I'm sorry this happened." Lauren was immediately rushed to the hospital in critical condition. She underwent life-saving surgery and spent about 3 weeks in intensive care, including 4 days in a coma. Barrison also required medical treatment for head injuries and the puncture wounds inflicted by the dog. The aftermath of the shooting was chaotic. 2 shell casings were found at the scene, and there was shattered glass on the back door of the house, indicating the direction of at least 1 bullet. Interestingly, while Lauren had used Robert's phone to call 911, both her and Robert's phones were later found at the base of the umbrella stand. This violent incident marked the culmination of months of escalating tensions at Hawthorne Hill Farm. What had begun as a training arrangement between an Olympic level coach and an aspiring rider had devolved into a situation of fear, accusations, and ultimately violence. The events of this day would have far-reaching consequences for all involved, leading to a complex legal battle and forever changing the lives of Michael Barrison, Lauren Kanarek, and those around them. In the hours following the shooting on August 7, 2019, law enforcement quickly moved to secure the scene and gather evidence. The police found 2 shell casings at the location, corroborating the accounts of 2 shots being fired. They also noted shattered glass on the back door of the house, which provided information about the direction of at least 1 bullet. Michael Barrison was arrested at the scene. While receiving treatment at the hospital, he was overheard by police making several statements. He repeatedly said, "I had a good life," and also stated, "They destroyed my life in the last 6 months. They took it all away. I'm sorry this happened." These statements were later used as evidence of his state of mind at the time of the shooting. Interestingly, investigators did not test Barrison, Lauren, or Robert for gunpowder residue to verify who had fired the weapon. This omission would later become a point of contention in the legal proceedings. Lauren Kanarek was rushed to Morristown Medical Center in critical condition. She had sustained 2 gunshot wounds to her upper chest and required immediate surgery. Lauren spent about 3 weeks in intensive care, including 4 days in a medically induced coma. The injuries were life-threatening, and her recovery was expected to be long and challenging. On August 8, 2019, the day after the shooting, Barrison was formally charged with 2 counts of attempted murder. The charges were for the life-threatening injuries sustained by Lauren and the alleged shot fired at Robert Goodwin. Barrison was also charged with weapons offenses. The legal process commenced shortly after the shooting. Barrison was charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and weapons offenses. His defense team, led by Edward Belinkas, entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. This uncommon defense strategy aimed to demonstrate that Barrison had experienced a mental breakdown, rendering him unaccountable for his actions. The prosecution, led by Christopher Schellhorn, sought to present the case as a straightforward attempted murder. As the trial approached in 2022, Barrison's appearance and demeanor had noticeably deteriorated. He was held in custody without bail during this period. The trial began in late March 2022 in Morristown, New Jersey. It involved testimony from numerous witnesses, including Lauren Kanarek, Robert Goodwin, and Mary Haskins Gray. The prosecution focused on Barrison's actions on August 7, 2019, arguing that retrieving a gun and shooting Kanarek constituted clear intent to kill. They urged the jury not to be swayed by any negative information about Lauren or Robert. The defense portrayed Barrison as a victim of prolonged harassment, emphasizing the lack of response to his multiple 911 calls in the week leading up to the shooting. They argued this contributed to his deteriorating mental state. Much of the evidence regarding Kanarek's past behavior and criminal history was deemed inadmissible, frustrating the defense's efforts to provide context for Barrison's state of mind. Mary Haskins Gray testified about Barrison's declining mental state, describing how Kanarek's social media posts deeply affected him and others at the farm. Robert Goodwin provided his account of the shooting, claiming he saw Barrison shoot Lauren and then attempt to shoot him. The defense questioned inconsistencies in his testimony. Lauren Kanarek described her dissatisfaction with the training arrangement and denied making child abuse allegations against Barrison. The defense's attempts to question her about her social media posts were limited by the court. Defense experts Dr. Stephen Simring and Dr. Charles Hassan testified that Barrison suffered from persecutory delusional disorder. They believed Kanarek's social media posts contributed to his mental decline. The prosecution's expert, Dr. Louis Schlesinger, countered that there was no evidence of psychosis in Barrison. He suggested Barrison might have been exaggerating his symptoms. In closing, the prosecution urged the jury to focus on Barrison's actions on the day of the shooting. The defense emphasized the alleged campaign to destroy Barrison and questioned the credibility of Kanarek and Goodwin's testimonies. The jury deliberated for approximately 18 hours over several days. They requested clarification on the expert evaluations and reviewed specific testimony, indicating careful consideration of the mental health aspects of the case. After nearly 4 days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. On April 12, 2022, they returned to the courtroom to deliver their decision. The tension in the room was palpable as the foreperson stood to announce the jury's findings. For the first count, attempted murder of Lauren Kanarek, the jury found Michael Barrison not guilty by reason of insanity. This verdict indicated that the jury accepted the defense's argument that Barrison was not in a rational state of mind when he shot Kanarek. On the second count, attempted murder of Robert Goodwin, the jury found Barrison not guilty. This verdict suggested that the jury was not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Barrison had actually fired a shot at Goodwin, possibly due to the lack of physical evidence supporting this claim. For the third count, possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose to use against Lauren Kanarek, the jury again found Barrison not guilty by reason of insanity. This verdict was consistent with their finding on the first count. Finally, on the fourth count, possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose, presumably in relation to Robert Goodwin, the jury found Barrison not guilty. The verdicts were a clear victory for the defense team. Their strategy of arguing that Barrison was not in his right mind at the time of the shooting had been successful. The jury had been convinced that the former Olympian's mental state at the time of the incident rendered him not criminally responsible for his actions. Upon hearing the verdict, Barrison, who had appeared frail and distressed throughout the trial, became emotional. He was seen embracing his attorney, tears in his eyes. The defense team celebrated the outcome, describing it as justice being served. For Lauren Kanarek and her family, however, the verdict was a devastating blow. They had hoped to see Barrison held accountable for his actions and were shocked by the jury's decision. Following the verdict, Barrison was transferred to psychiatric care rather than prison. In September 2022, he was moved to a less restrictive facility for at least 6 months of further treatment. His once illustrious equestrian career was effectively over, with organizations barring him from competitions. Lauren Kanarek, despite her physical recovery, continued to grapple with the emotional impact of the shooting. She filed a civil lawsuit against Barrison, who countersued in response. Barrison also took legal action against the police officers who had responded to his earlier calls for help. The case had broader implications for the equestrian community, raising questions about handling disputes in high-level training environments. Jonathan Kanarek, Lauren's father, expressed dismay at the verdict, believing Barrison should have been held criminally responsible. As of the last update, Barrison's future remained uncertain, dependent on ongoing psychiatric evaluations. The story of Barrison and Kanarek serves as a stark reminder of how unchecked conflicts can escalate to life-altering consequences, underscoring the importance of mental health awareness in high-pressure environments. Traditionally, thank you for watching, and remind you that it would be great if you support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel.
On the border between Oklahoma and Texas lies the small town of Waurika, with a population of about 2,000 residents. It's a typical American provincial town where everyone knows each other and life flows at a measured, unhurried pace. It was here, in a cozy house on the outskirts of town, that the rich family lived: Father Dwayne, Mother Gail, and their 4 children, 3 boys and their only daughter, Heather. The rich couple chose Warwick as their home because of its similarity to Elgin, Oklahoma, where they grew up. They believed it was the perfect place to raise children, quiet, safe, with a low crime rate. However, as often happens, the outward tranquility of the small town concealed its dark sides. In Warwick, like in many similar towns, teenagers suffered from a lack of entertainment and opportunities for self-realization. This led young people to seek alternative ways to spend their leisure time, often dangerous and destructive. They would gather on the outskirts of town, experiment with alcohol and drugs, and engage in risky activities. This was the atmosphere in the town during the fall of 1996 when this tragic story began, one that would forever change the lives of many local residents and leave a deep mark in the memory of the entire community. At that time, the Rich family was going through a difficult period. Dwayne, who worked as an electrician, had recently suffered a serious injury at work. During a transformer explosion, he sustained severe burns. The man barely survived and needed extensive treatment and skin grafts. Due to his injury, he couldn't work, which significantly impacted the family's financial situation. The entire burden of supporting the family fell on Gail's shoulders, who had to take on additional work to provide for the family and pay for her husband's expensive treatment. In the American healthcare system, medical services are extraordinarily expensive, so every dollar counted. The children also had to take on some household responsibilities, especially Heather, who was the second youngest in the family. Despite their financial difficulties, the Riches tried to maintain optimism and support each other. Gail and Dwayne were loving parents who strived to give their children the best upbringing and education possible. They adhered to traditional family values and tried to instill these in their children. However, as often happens during teenage years, their only daughter began showing signs of rebellion and a desire for independence. The parents paid special attention to Heather, who was born on January 19, 1980. She was the family's favorite, the only girl among brothers. From early childhood, Heather demonstrated remarkable abilities and persistence in her studies, making her parents proud. At Warwick High School, Heather Rich quickly became one of the most popular students. She combined a rare mix of beauty, intelligence, and athletic ability. As an honor student, she consistently demonstrated high academic performance. She was chosen for the cheerleading squad, which added to her popularity among classmates. In her junior year of high school, Heather was nominated for Homecoming Queen and was voted class favorite. Her natural beauty and energy attracted the attention of many boys. However, behind this external glamour lay serious internal problems. The constant pressure to maintain the image of the perfect girl began to affect Heather's mental state. By 8th grade, she had developed eating disorders. She would induce vomiting in an attempt to maintain a size 2. The situation worsened after her father's injury when additional responsibility for household chores fell on her shoulders. Heather began self-harming, though she carefully concealed this from those around her. She diligently maintained the image of a successful and happy girl, but internally felt increasing pressure. Her perfectionism and desire to meet others' expectations gradually became an unbearable burden. Despite her internal struggles, Heather remained a friendly and caring girl. She had an adventurous spirit and loved fun and new experiences. At 16, she was going through a typical teenage period of rebellion, eager to try everything life had to offer. Unfortunately, this desire for experimentation would later play a fatal role in her destiny. In the summer of 1996, Heather began dating Randy Wood, who was born on July 7, 1979. Their relationship was quite illustrative of the contrasts in their small town. Randy came from one of Warwick's poorest families. He lived with his single mother, they moved frequently, and by 5th grade, he had changed schools 3 times. Their house stood out with its run-down appearance and broken windows. Every day, Randy walked a mile to school. Despite his difficult life, Randy had a calm and polite demeanor. Although many considered him slow and not particularly bright, he was appointed captain of the school football team. Paradoxically, It was these flaws of Randy's that attracted Heather. They spent a lot of time together, driving around town in Randy's grandmother's car, attending church, and talking for hours. While their relationship was close, they maintained certain boundaries. However, at the beginning of the school year, their relationship ended due to rumors. Randy heard that Heather had been skinny dipping at a party and ended their 5-month relationship. After this breakup, Heather's behavior began to change dramatically. She started experimenting with methamphetamine, alcohol, and other drugs. The situation worsened when less than a week after breaking up with Randy, one of Heather's friends, 20-year-old Dennis, died by suicide. This event deeply affected the girl, and she continued her self-destructive behavior. On September 27, 1996, an incident occurred that would foreshadow the future tragedy. Heather was caught drinking alcohol with a friend during a football game. For this, she was suspended from school for 3 days and nearly kicked off the cheerleading squad. Gail and Dwayne, concerned about their daughter's behavior, even scheduled a therapy appointment for October 3rd. Unfortunately, this meeting would never take place. On the evening of October 2nd, 1996, a serious argument erupted in the Rich household between Heather and her mother Gail. The cause was a $300 phone bill that Heather had run up talking to her friends, especially Randy Wood. Given the family's difficult financial situation, such an amount was extremely high. Gail tried to explain to her daughter that the family couldn't afford such expenses, especially considering the high cost of her father's treatment. She wanted to teach Heather to value money and respect others' work. "All you do is waste my money," Gail exclaimed during the argument. Dwayne, though usually calmer in family conflicts, supported his wife this time. Heather took the criticism hard. When emotions had somewhat subsided, she went downstairs to the living room, said goodnight to her father, but demonstratively ignored her mother, showing her resentment. On this tense note, everyone went to their rooms. However, this wasn't just another teenage argument. That evening, Heather had secret plans. She had arranged to meet with Josh Bagwell, whom she had recently started flirting with after breaking up with Randy. Josh was a senior from one of the wealthiest families in town. He lived with his grandmother and grandfather, who spoiled him by giving him everything he wanted. Around midnight, after waiting for her parents to fall asleep, Heather climbed out through her bedroom window. She didn't take any change of clothes or makeup, items she usually never left home without. This would be her last night at home, though she didn't know it yet. Outside, she was met by not only Josh. With him were Randy Wood and 19-year-old Curtis Gamble, a young man with a criminal past whom Heather hadn't known before. They planned to spend the evening in a trailer behind Josh's house, where teenagers regularly gathered to drink alcohol and use drugs. The next morning, October 3rd, Gail began preparing breakfast as usual and calling the children to the table. When Heather didn't come down, her mother initially attributed this to teenage resentment over yesterday's argument. She was sure that Humber would eventually bring her daughter to the kitchen, despite her rebellious mood. However, time passed, and Heather still hadn't appeared. When Gail, losing patience, went up to her daughter's room, she found an empty bed. At that time, mobile phones weren't yet common, so Heather didn't have one. The worried parents began calling all of their daughter's friends, but no one knew where she might be. Such behavior was completely out of character for Heather. Despite her recent behavioral problems, she had never run away from home before. Moreover, the girl always cared about her appearance and was unlikely to go anywhere for long without a change of clothes and makeup. But all her things remained at home. Gail and Dwayne immediately drove to the Warka Sheriff's Office to report their daughter missing. The mother told them about yesterday's argument over the phone bill and how her daughter had refused to acknowledge her fault. The sheriff tried to calm the worried parents, assuring them that the girl had probably just run away from home, as teenagers often do after arguing with their parents. However, law enforcement explained that for an official missing person report, at least 24 hours had to pass without any contact. Since this time hadn't elapsed yet, the police couldn't accept the report and sent the couple home to wait for news from Heather. Disappointed by the police's response, Gail and Dwayne decided to start their own search in town. Their worst fears were being confirmed. Something had happened to their daughter, and they felt that every lost minute could be critical. Gail began her own investigation by calling Heather's closest friends. First, she contacted 17-year-old Randy Wood. During the conversation, Heather's ex-boyfriend insisted he had no idea about her whereabouts. However, something in his voice alarmed Gail. He spoke like a robot, repeating a rehearsed story, and showed no concern about his former girlfriend's disappearance. Next was a call to Josh Bagwell. His grandmother answered the phone, saying that the boy was resting after last night's party, and she didn't want to disturb him. The woman categorically refused to call her grandson to the phone, mentioning in passing that she was cleaning the trailer in the backyard where the teenagers had held their party. For a week, the parents drove around the entire county searching for any trace of their daughter, but to no avail. When 24 hours had passed, they went back to the police, and this time law enforcement finally joined the search operation. However, no valuable information about the missing schoolgirl emerged. The tragic resolution came when patrol officers examining the area near the Texas border noticed a body in the river. It was half submerged in the muddy water, but people on the bridge spotted it. The unknown victim's skin was covered with a thick layer of dirt, as if deliberately, to make the body harder to discover. When divers pulled the gruesome find to shore, something even more horrific was revealed beneath the layer of dirt. The body had numerous buckshot wounds, indicating point-blank shooting, likely from a shotgun. The face was so mutilated that identifying the deceased at first glance seemed impossible. Since there was only one missing person registered in the area, Heather Rich's parents were called for identification. They were only able to identify their daughter by an engraved ring that her mother had given her. The victim's identity was finally confirmed through dental records. Experts found the fixed braces that the schoolgirl had been wearing in the mutilated body. News of the young cheerleader's death instantly spread through town and became the main topic of discussion the next day. Within hours, all local residents knew about the tragedy. Football player Randy Wood also learned about it, coinciding with the annual game where he had been named king of the game for several seasons in a row. Usually, such matches were followed by loud celebrations, but this time there was no mood for festivities. The detectives, taking on the investigation, first spoke with Heather's parents. By that time, Gail had already called many of her daughter's friends and acquaintances. Her suspicions fell on two young men, Heather's ex-boyfriend, 17-year-old Randy Wood, and her current boyfriend Josh Bagwell. During conversations with classmates and other friends of the deceased, investigators got several leads indicating that Josh and Randy had information about the events of that fatal night. Particular attention was drawn to the type of ammunition used in the killing, so-called double buckshot. These powerful shells had excessive killing power for executing a 16-year-old girl. An important breakthrough came when it was discovered that such rare ammunition was sold in only one store in town, Beaver Creek Lumber and Hardware. After checking receipts, police established that Josh Bagwell had purchased them shortly before the murder. According to the seller, Josh wasn't with his best friend Randy, but with someone named Curtis Gamble. Curtis, who was already 19 years old, had a criminal history. Despite his young age, he had already been arrested multiple times and spent most of his conscious life in juvenile detention centers. The young man was completely unstable and had repeatedly caught law enforcement's attention. He had been caught driving drunk, shooting at dogs, horses, and even random passers-by. On October 23, police visited Curtis's house in a neighboring town. Even more significant was the fact that just a few kilometers from his house was the very bridge where the mutilated body was found. According to his grandmother, Curtis knew this area well and had often visited the bridge since childhood. The investigation focused on three young men, each representing different social strata of the small town. Josh Bagwell was a typical representative of the golden youth. He always drove the coolest cars and wore the most fashionable clothes, displaying his family's wealth. By 17, he had already crashed 6 cars, and his latest was a white Dodge Stealth. When he was once detained for drunk driving, he arrogantly demanded a lawyer. Randy Wood, on the contrary, came from a poor family, but thanks to his talent and persistence in sports, he gained no less popularity than his wealthy friend. Classmates adored the handsome team captain for his masterful play on the field. He became the best football player not only in school but in the entire town, even gaining popularity among school teams at the state level. Curtis Gambill turned out to be the oldest among those involved in the case. He was already 19. He had a long history of legal troubles and was considered dangerous and unpredictable by local residents. Unlike the other 2 boys, who had never had problems with the law before and weren't considered aggressive or dangerous, Randy and Josh were inseparable friends and usually spent weekends driving around dirt roads in Josh's car. Girls could often be seen in their company. The boys regularly consumed alcohol and occasionally smoked marijuana. Due to the lack of entertainment venues for youth in town, teenagers simply had nothing else to do, so they entertained themselves however they could. It was known that Heather Rich often spent time in this company. According to a friend, she had also tried weed and alcohol with them, and on the night before her disappearance, she had snuck out to have fun with the popular boys. This news shocked the parents of the 16-year-old honor student, who had no idea their daughter had fallen in with such dangerous company. Detectives decided to talk to Josh and Randy, who were the last to see the murdered schoolgirl. Both boys told the same story about spending the evening playing dominoes and drinking in the trailer behind Josh's house. However, they denied any contact with Heather that evening. Their mechanical, seemingly rehearsed stories and lack of emotion regarding their mutual friend's death only intensified investigator suspicions. The next day, detectives managed to meet with Curtis. He was detained and brought to the sheriff's office in Waurika. The interrogation lasted over 8 hours, but the suspect said almost nothing, though he agreed to take a polygraph test. However, what proved most valuable was his admission about owning a rather rare weapon, a Mossberg shotgun, notable for its 9-round magazine. When the weapon was seized and ballistic testing ordered, experts officially confirmed that the schoolgirl had been shot with Curtis's shotgun. After being presented with evidence of his involvement in the young cheerleader's murder, the young man gave in. He told police that he had dragged his 2 friends, Randy and Josh, into this crime, after which he wrote a detailed 2-page confession. 3 weeks after Heather's death, law enforcement finally had a suspect who confessed to the crime. Considering the probable involvement of other young men, Randy and Josh were also arrested and brought to the station. They were shown Curtis's testimony, where he claimed that he himself initiated the attack on the girl, but Randy was the direct perpetrator. According to Curtis, he handed his shotgun to his friend and ordered him to shoot the innocent victim, while Josh was simply present. However, police were skeptical of this testimony. The football team captain didn't fit the profile of a typical criminal. The young man had never had problems with the law before. He was an exemplary student and successful athlete, popular among his peers. No one had ever spoken badly about him. Only after persistent efforts by police and a second meeting with investigators did Randy finally begin to give testimony. However, he categorically denied his direct involvement in the murder, claiming that Curtis was the shooter and had initiated the attack on Heather, while Josh simply helped him. Josh, for his part, refused to cooperate with law enforcement. Thus, in October 1996, investigators had 2 confessions that contradicted each other in many aspects. Eventually, investigators concluded that Randy's testimony seemed more truthful, especially since he successfully passed a lie detector test. In February 1998, almost a year and a half after Heather's tragic death, Josh Bagwell's trial began. The case had garnered so much attention that there were too many people wanting to get into the courtroom. Eventually, access to the court proceedings was restricted, with both casual spectators and press representatives being barred. The defendants' lawyers resorted to various attempts to justify their clients. In essence, the attorneys tried to tarnish Heather's reputation, portraying her as an alcoholic and promiscuous girl who had allegedly entered into an intimate relationship with Curtis and then began blackmailing him with exposure, forcing the young man to resort to extreme measures. The parents had to defend their daughter's honor and dignity. In reality, the girl was a diligent student, talented athlete, an extremely decent person who simply ended up in the wrong company and encountered a true criminal. At the hearing, unexpectedly for everyone, Curtis returned to his initial version of events, claiming that Josh wasn't involved in the crime at all and didn't even know about the murder plans. Instead, according to Curtis, it was Randy who fired the fatal shot. This testimony deeply affected Randy. Unexpectedly for all, the football team captain made a desperate move. He rejected the plea deal. The young man didn't want his confession to be seen as solely motivated by a desire to save his own skin. Accusing his accomplices right in the courtroom, Randy stated that above all, he wanted to achieve justice for the innocently murdered girl. On February 14th, Curtis Gamble was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and the intentional commission of this especially serious crime. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with an additional 99 years. Randy would receive life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 40 years. Josh Bagwell also received life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He was sent to serve his sentence in the same correctional facility as Curtis. In January 2002, the story took an unexpected turn. Curtis and Josh made a bold prison escape attempt, taking advantage of the night darkness. They managed to hide out in Texas for 10 days. A nationwide manhunt was declared. Eventually, the escapees were caught and returned behind bars to continue serving their life sentences. An even stranger twist came when Josh's mother, Teresa, tried to help organize another escape. Her plan involved contacting Curtis's brother, Rick, and smuggling weapons into the prison by posing as Josh's attorney. She also wanted Rick to help her gather firearms, mats, and mobile phones for the escapees. However, when she contacted him, Curtis's brother reported it to the police. After a period of police surveillance, Teresa was arrested and sentenced to 20 years in prison, with 12 years suspended. The Heather Rich case deeply affected the Warka community and became a grim reminder of how quickly life can go wrong. Her death forced many parents to reconsider their approach to raising teenagers and pay more attention to their children's social circles. Special attention was drawn to the story of Heather's friend, Dennis Wayne Goss Jr., whose death from a shotgun blast on September 25, 1996, just a week before Heather's murder, still raises questions. Dennis was friends with Curtis Gamble, and before his death, he told his father that someone was trying to kill him. During their prison escape, Curtis and Josh even stole a .22 caliber pistol and a truck from Dennis's father's house. Curtis knew exactly where the safe keys were kept. Moreover, Dennis's family was on a threat list that Curtis wrote while in prison. The case of Dennis's death remains open to this day. On the railings of the Belknap Bridge, you can still see the inscription, "Dawn Not Forgotten." This graffiti became a kind of folk memorial to Heather, a girl who was popular among people and whose life ended too early due to a fatal combination of circumstances and the wrong choice of company. The Heather Rich case left a deep mark on the life of the small town of Warka. It exposed problems that are often silenced in similar provincial towns: the lack of organized leisure activities for teenagers, easy access to alcohol and drugs, social inequality that breeds dangerous alliances between privileged youth and criminal elements. The fate of the three young men involved in the murder turned out differently, although they all ended up behind bars. Randy Wood, despite the severity of his sentence, remained in the community's memory as someone who found the courage to confess the truth, risking his own life. His remorse was genuine, and even Heather's parents acknowledged this during their personal meeting on a television talk show in May 1998. Curtis Gamble and Josh Bagwell, on the contrary, continued to demonstrate antisocial behavior even in prison. Their escape attempt and subsequent events only confirmed the danger they posed to society. Particularly telling was the story of Josh's mother, who, instead of acknowledging her son's guilt, tried to help him evade punishment through illegal means. The tragedy forced local authorities to revise their policies regarding youth recreation and teenage crime prevention. Controls over alcohol sales to minors were strengthened, and more opportunities for organized youth activities were created. The Heather Rich story became a warning for parents and teenagers about the importance of noticing warning signs early and not ignoring the first signs of risky behavior. Her death showed that even in the quietest towns, deadly dangers can lurk, especially when it comes to careless choice of company and experimentation with alcohol and drugs. Heather's memory lives on not only in the hearts of her family and friends but serves as a reminder of how quickly life can end due to one careless decision. The inscription on Belknap Bridge has become a symbol of this tragedy and a warning to future generations.